wealthy entrepreneur.
He was very generous and very giving to the community.
And his closest friend.
A good old country boy. He was like a brother.
Are ruthlessly gunned down.
It had all the hallmarks of an execution.
They would have died almost instantaneously.
Police chase down an elusive killer.
A case like this is like a jigsaw puzzle.
We had no hair, no fingerprints, no DNA left behind. Who had a reason to kill both of these men?
It's a complete whodunit.
Until the case takes a jaw-dropping turn.
Oh my gosh, where's my mother?
She was held at gunpoint, tied into a chair, and held captive there for a few days. They had more firepower than our SWAT team had.
And finds a killer
This just didn't add up.
no one ever suspected.
It was a real shock.
He had, I felt like, 2 different lives.
And then you quickly realize that it was all a lie.
You think it's over, but it's not over.
A killer may have gotten away with murder.
Conway, Arkansas, a small city with southern charm, just outside of Little Rock.
It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your kids. You know, not a lot of crime, and it's made that way because of the people that live there.
But on Sunday, May 19th, 2002, police receive a 911 call that shatters the early evening peace.
There's some people shot next door. I don't know what the situation is, but some girls came over running to my house like crazy. They said someone had been shot. Everybody had been shot in that house.
Police race to an upscale home in the city's affluent West End.
Patrol officers went inside the residence, saw 2 deceased individuals laying in the foyer. It was clear to them that we've got a double homicide.
Homicide detectives arrive on the scene minutes later.
Once I entered the residence, I saw the 2 victims. Both of them were laying face down in the floor. Their hands were to their side, palms up, and blood had pooled around both of their heads. Based on the coagulation of the body fluids, it appeared that they had been down for quite some time. The first of the 2 victims appeared to be an older gentleman, and he had a folded white towel placed on the back of his head, and there appeared to be a gunshot artifact on the back of the towel. The second victim, the younger man, he had a gunshot wound to the back of the head, and there were white fibers on the back of his head, consistent with the same white towel.
Detectives find no sign of a murder weapon, but something else grabs their attention.
We found a ball cap, and inside that ball cap there was an unspent .45 caliber round. We weren't really sure if that was something that had been purposely left there at the crime scene or if that was done inadvertently.
An extensive search of the house finds no evidence of forced entry.
There were no signs of disturbance and tons of things of value that were still inside the home. Both wallets of the victims were found in the next room. That kind of took away from the idea that this was some sort of robbery or home invasion.
My professional opinion was it had all the hallmarks of an execution.
But if this was an execution, why were the victims targeted? And who were they?
A young lady by the name of Brandy that had discovered the bodies told us who she believed the victims to be. We were able to confirm with photo ID that the older of the 2 was the homeowner, Carter Elliott, a local businessman. The second victim was a close personal friend of Carter Elliott, Timmy Wayne Robertson of Star City, Arkansas. Brandy indicated that she and Carter were in a relationship, and she knew Timmy Wayne because Timmy Wayne sometimes stayed with Carter.
Brandy agrees to go to the police station for questioning, while police reach out to the families of the two victims to tell them the terrible news.
I was in my apartment and my mother came over. She said, "Oh, Ashley, I'm so sorry." And I said, "Who died?" And she said, "It's your father." I just crumbled to the ground and felt like I had been punched in my stomach, and all I could do was cry my eyes out. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew he had been shot.
From his humble roots in the tiny city of Helena, Arkansas, to owner of a multi-million-dollar chemical company, Carter Elliott was a self-made success story.
My father was an amazing man. He and my mom got married in El Dorado, Arkansas. My mom was 17 or 18, my dad 20. He didn't go to college, but he's just dedicated and a hard worker and very driven. My dad was really social and he was a lot of fun. He was like social butterfly. He was just fun to hang out with.
Behind that larger-than-life personality was a man devoted to giving.
He wanted to help people. If you were around him or spent time with him, you were taken care of.
One of the people Carter helped was a young man who Carter met through a family friend.
Timmy Wayne had kind of a rough upbringing, and my dad took care of him the way he took care of everybody that he came across. He was like a brother. He stayed at my dad's house. We celebrated my birthday together. He went to my best friend's wedding. I mean, he was just part of the family.
Now, both Carter and Timmy Wayne are tragically gone. What's left is the mystery of why this happened and who could have done it.
I can't fathom what had happened or transpired to be shot in the back of the head, face down. It's just so unbelievable.
At the house, investigators continue combing the crime scene.
We dusted the house for latent fingerprints. We went through the trash. We're looking for anything in particular that might give us a legitimate lead.
Police also canvass the neighbors, hoping someone can point to a suspect or even when the shootings occurred.
Even though this was a very quiet neighborhood, not a single neighbor heard a gunshot, not a single neighbor heard a disturbance, so it really was quite baffling. We had no firm direction to go in as far as a potential suspect, and nothing that really told us when this potentially could have occurred. Anything was possible. I walked out of that house and I had as many questions as I did before I walked in. There were numerous things that just didn't fit. I needed to find out what was going on.
Coming up, detectives dig deeper.
There's so much that is bizarre.
People suspected some type of romantic relationship.
And discover troubling evidence.
He had a large hook that was in the ceiling.
We found adult diapers.
Before the truth blindsides everyone.
All of a sudden, we had a person that nobody really would suspect.
It sent a shockwave through the community.
I was terrified. I was traumatized.
I don't believe that was an accident.
Hours after discovering the murder of successful businessman Carter Elliott and his close friend Timmy Wayne Robertson, detectives are searching for more clues.
The little evidence we had was at the crime lab, but we had no firm direction to go in as far as a potential suspect.
Detectives bring in Brandy, Carter's girlfriend, who discovered the bodies.
When I investigate a homicide, I look at anybody who has a potential to be upset with the person that would be a motivation to end someone's life over.
If you don't mind me asking, how long have y'all been seeing each other?
I would say probably since last fall.
Are you and he pretty close?
Yeah, we hadn't even had a disagreement.
We also want to know whether or not they had a motive, means, and opportunity to potentially commit the crime themselves.
Would Brandy reveal anything to indicate she might be a suspect?
Try to establish a timeline here when you last talked to Carter.
Saturday night at about, and I'm estimating, 11, 12 o'clock. I talked to him on the phone. I was in Memphis, Tennessee. He was at home, he said, in Conway.
Brandy says the next day, she and a friend headed to Carter's house when they got back from Memphis.
You know, I just opened the door. And his head is right there at my feet. And I immediately look up and I see another person, and I know exactly who it is. I mean, I see Timmy Wayne all the time. I would recognize that body if I couldn't even, you know.
Detectives ask if Brandy knew who might want Carter and Timmy Wayne dead.
Do you have any opinions, ideas,
None.
anything, anybody
No.
you would suspect? Is there anybody that you can think of that may have had a grudge or was mad with Tim?
Not that I know of.
As detectives pull Brandy's phone records to confirm her story, they receive the results of the autopsy.
The medical examiner's report gave us an idea of a timeline that these two victims were killed late Saturday evening. In the case of Brandy Watkins, we were able to account for the fact that she was in Memphis, Tennessee, at the same time that the murders were committed.
Investigators now have an idea of when Timmy Wayne and Carter were murdered, but the autopsy report also reveals chilling details about how the two men died.
The medical examiner was able to tell us they were both flat on the floor when they were shot.
The autopsy report has one more valuable revelation. The killer used special bullets called Glazer Blue safety slugs.
This particular type of ammunition was a rarity. It is extremely expensive and is extremely devastating.
It is also the same type of bullet found in a hat at the crime scene.
I considered it a huge lead because when we found the offender, if they had a tie to this particular type of ammunition, that would be a good indicator to us that we were on the right track.
Armed with new information, police reach out to those who knew Carter and Timmy Wayne to see who might want either man dead. They start with Carter's ex-wife, Lark, who divorced him 10 years earlier.
Our investigation revealed that their breakup was fairly tumultuous.
But did Carter's ex-wife have any reason to harm him? Detectives bring Lark Elliott in for an interview.
She told us background information about the issues that they had when they were married and the breakup of their marriage.
They had been married for 18 years. I think my mother and father always had a kind of a roller coaster of a relationship. My dad was passionate and he was vocal, and at sometimes you couldn't gauge what was going to happen next. It was not a very fun time to experience.
Lark tells detectives she eventually divorced Carter in 1992. Now living in Salt Lake City, Lark remarried a doctor named Dick Conti.
Dick was a friend of my mother's family. And Dick had gone to medical school with my uncle, and that's kind of how their relationship started.
Lark denies any involvement in Carter's death. And when detectives ask Lark where she was the night of the murders, she says she was over 1,000 miles away in Utah.
We were able to determine based off of phone records and work schedules that she was in Salt Lake City, Utah when these crimes occurred.
With Lark ruled out as a suspect, detectives shift focus to Timmy Wayne Robertson. Was it possible that the 25-year-old friend of Carter was the intended target?
We interviewed the family of Timmy Wayne Robertson, all of Timmy Wayne's close friends, talked to girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, find out if there was anybody in particular that Timmy Wayne had issue with, any fights, any bad breakups, anything that indicated that he was the intended target, but nothing that involved Timmy Wayne. Just really rose to the level of somebody being mad at him enough to want to hurt him. Everything from an investigative standpoint kept telling us it had to be something to do with Carter Elliott.
Detectives are back to square one. Then they get a crucial tip from someone familiar with Carter's businesses.
We were told about a local businessman that had partnered with Carter in some business ventures. We found out sometimes he would have words with Carter.
Was it possible the two men were killed because someone targeted Carter over a business deal gone bad?
A bad business deal could be a reason to have committed these murders.
Something was going to happen. Something would break. I'm looking for business issues that led to two people being brutally murdered in West Conway.
Detectives investigating the murders of Timmy Wayne Robertson and Carter Elliott have just received a tip about a possible conflict between Carter and one of his business partners.
Danny Cook was a local businessman that had partnered with Carter. From what we were told, they had had words from time to time regarding the different businesses that they were involved in. We weren't sure at that point in time if this was maybe a business-related dispute or something like that.
Detectives bring the 38-year-old businessman in for an interview and ask about his relationship with Carter Elliott.
In the last 3 or 4 years, we'd actually started some business ventures together. We had quite a few of those together. I always paid all the bills.
We have to look at all of those different businesses that they were involved in, especially when it came to anything that potentially could have led to hard feelings.
Was it possible a disagreement over money between Danny and Carter turned deadly, with Timmy Wayne caught in the crossfire?
I can only imagine what's going through all the minds about this.
Potentially every human being on the face of this earth is a suspect.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Right.
Danny dismisses any notion of conflict with Carter.
Well, I'll just tell you this, Carter was my best friend. Like everybody's got a best friend. I'm sure y'all have a best friend.
Danny also tells police that the night of the murder, he was at home in bed, nursing an ailing stomach.
I've been in a lot of pain, and in the evenings I take pretty much enough medicine that knocks me out.
Detectives look into Danny Cook and Carter Elliott's business dealings.
We determined that we would seek a search warrant for financial records as far as transactions to see if there were any that would have been outside the norm.
But as investigators look into Carter and Danny's business, they uncover something much more personal about Danny's wife, Carla.
An employee of his suspected that Carter and Carla were having some type of romantic relationship. We had several different people tell us that it was water cooler talk. He was a single guy. He liked the ladies.
If the rumors are true, Danny's jealousy could be a motive for murder. Detectives question Carla about her relationship with Carter.
Carla indicated that they kind of flirted with each other, but she considered him more of a brother-type figure than anything else.
Danny also dismisses the rumors of an affair.
Danny Cook indicated that he did not suspect his wife at any point in time of having an inappropriate relationship with Carter.
What's more, both Carla and her son can confirm that Danny was at home in bed at the time of the murders.
Both appeared to have been at home during this period of time.
There was never any real evidence except for could have been. And the law requires that you have something more than mere speculation.
After hitting a dead end with Danny Cook, investigators drilled deep into Carter's life, looking for anyone who could be a possible suspect.
We interviewed business partners, investors, former employees. We interviewed a group of men that gamble with Carter on poker. We went in every conceivable direction, trying to run down every potential motive, and we just kept coming up with nothing.
Detectives still have no solid leads 3 weeks into the investigation. And the failure to identify a suspect is taking its toll on the victims' families.
We were traumatized. Nothing in life is going to prepare you for murder. I don't think that's something you process.
Ashley also worries about her mother, Lark, who has just lost her ex-husband and is now struggling in her second marriage.
I would go back and forth between Utah and Arkansas to be with my mom. She and Dick were going separate ways, and they had broken up.
As the weeks pass, hopes of finding the killer start to fade.
I never like to lose, but it's a complete whodunit. You start to wonder in the back of your mind, is this going to be the case that ultimately I'm not able to solve? I felt like the family of Timmy Wayne Robertson and Carter Elliott's family needed to have that closure. They needed to know what happened.
A killer may have gotten away with murder. That is a huge tragedy for these two men and for these two families.
Then, out of nowhere, a startling development rocks the case.
I had received a phone call that my mom had not shown up for work. My mom goes to work no matter what. I contacted the Salt Lake Police Department, and I asked the police department to go to her house. Her bed was unmade. Her closet was a mess. Things were out of order. Oh my gosh, where's my mother?
One month after Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson are gunned down, Carter's ex-wife, Lark, has disappeared in the middle of the murder investigation. Is she on the run from investigators? Or could she be another victim?
I did not know if my mother was alive. I didn't know what had happened. I had just lost my father. I wanted to know where my mother was.
In a panic, Ashley and her brother reach out to Lark's second husband, Dick Conti, whom she recently divorced. They call him at his cabin home outside of Carson City, Nevada.
I got him on the phone. Dick was crying and just profusely saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry."
Ashley wasn't expecting what she heard next.
He had taken my mom as a desperate act in hopes of getting her back. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew he had her. He kidnapped my mom. He allowed us to talk to my mother. My mother was just completely out of it. My mother told me that she was there against her will and he was unstable.
Ashley is afraid of what Dick might do next.
Dick was crying and threatening to kill himself. He was just overwhelmed with emotion. Who knows what Dick was gonna do?
Ashley frantically reaches out to Nevada police.
Ashley was panicked when she called us. She felt that her mother's life was in danger.
Ashley begs police to go to Dick's cabin in the Sierra Mountains, but warns them of Dick's threat of violence.
It's extremely dangerous for our first patrol officers going in. Somebody was on the phone with Dr. Conti trying to calm the situation, keep him calm. He spun this sort of unreal story about how she was a willing participant. This wasn't somebody that had a plan. He was acting more emotionally than he was logically. Eventually, they got him to surrender peacefully.
I was told my mother was safe, and I'm thankful for that.
Lark is rushed to the hospital as a precaution. She tells police how Dick had abducted her.
He had been lying in wait for her, and then she was held at gunpoint, and then he drugged her, putting her in the back of his truck, and drove from Utah back to his cabin. When she woke up, she was tied into a chair and held captive there for a few days. I was sort of surprised that a man that was considered a prominent emergency room physician in our area could do something like this.
Back at the Douglas County Sheriff's Station, Dick Conti says splitting up with Lark pushed him over the edge.
She didn't want to be married anymore. It just literally drove me crazy and devastated me, I guess.
It ultimately took about 5 hours to get the entire story, but he admitted everything that he had done related to the kidnapping and imprisonment of Lark.
I thought that somehow by having her come back to Carson, I could rekindle something that isn't there anymore.
But Dick casually mentions something else about Lark that gets detectives' immediate attention.
She recently had her ex-husband was murdered.
What was his name?
Carter Elliott.
Carter Elliott. You know any of the circumstances behind that?
Only what she's told me.
Nevada police contact the Arkansas detectives investigating the murder of Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson.
I reached out to Conway, who confirmed that this was actually a crime that had been committed there.
When detectives hear what has happened to Lark, their investigation takes on new life.
The ex-wife of our victim here in Conway is kidnapped. That was too much of a coincidence, and cops will pretty much tell you that they don't believe in coincidences.
Did Dick have something to do with Carter and Timmy Wayne's death? If he would kidnap his ex-wife, what else could Dick be capable of? Arkansas detectives rushed to Nevada to interview Lark's ex-husband.
Have you ever met Carter Elliott?
No. I talked to him twice on the phone when I was at Lark's, just to pick up the phone and say hello.
The detectives asked Dick where he was the night of May 18th, when Carter and Timmy Wayne were murdered.
Do you have a calendar or something I can look at? I think I worked the night of May 15th. I got off and drove to my cabin in Duck Creek, Utah. I know I didn't leave there till the 21st.
Did you talk to anybody that you could think of?
I can't think of anyone that I,
That you recognized or not recognized you?
Yeah.
He seemed very calm, given the situation that he was currently involved in. He came off as wanting to be helpful.
After Dick is charged with the Lark's kidnapping, investigators are eager to search his cabin home for clues.
They were able to get a search warrant to go into Dick Conti's home. Dick Conti had this image that he was a successful emergency room physician. Open the front door, and then you quickly realize that it was all a lie.
Detectives investigating the double murder of Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson are executing a search warrant at the cabin of Dick Conti. The Nevada doctor has just been arrested for kidnapping his ex-wife, Lark Elliott, whose first husband was Carter Elliott.
From the outside, it was very picturesque. Once you got inside the cabin, you realized that he lived kind of like a hermit.
It was very dirty. There was evidence that animals had been in and out of the house.
Then, police find something even more disturbing.
Everywhere in that cabin, you could pretty much reach a firearm.
The volume of weaponry we found, it was pretty extraordinary for one person. He had more firepower than our SWAT team had.
That isn't the most troubling discovery detectives make.
He had a large hook that was in the ceiling. We also found that there were hidden video cameras all over the house.
But nothing prepares detectives for what they find next.
Investigators found maps to Conway. He had notes related to Carter Elliott, his address, letters from Dick Conti to Lark that said that he was willing to do anything to get her back, and the books that discussed how to be a silent assassin.
The next discovery is even more damning.
We found blue tip laser safety slugs, the same type of ammunition that was used to kill both of our victims in Conway.
For Dick Conti to have the same type of ammunition really raised our suspicion that Dick Conti committed these homicides.
As police collect evidence from the cabin to take back to Arkansas, investigators begin to try to answer crucial questions. Did the Nevada doctor execute Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson in cold blood? And if so, why?
Dick Conti, by all reports, was a very competent emergency room physician. You have to stop and question what was the motive.
Detectives sit down with Lark to learn more about her second husband.
I mean, there's so much about him that is bizarre. He had, I felt like, 2 different lives. He portrayed himself to be this, a doctor upstanding in the community, when in fact his other life he had guns, everywhere, weapons everywhere, in his house. And that's not something that I wanted to be a part of, was his other life.
Lark also says Dick wouldn't leave her alone after she left him.
Conti had gone on a campaign. He begged Lark to come back through phone calls and sending her letters and cards. When the little things didn't work, then he would escalate.
Was it possible Dick Conti's obsession with Lark caused him to target her first husband, Carter Elliott?
Did you ever make any statements to anybody about you might consider reconciling with Carter Elliott?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you and Conti ever discuss Carter?
I was planning an engagement party for Ashley, and Carter, Ashley's father, was going to come to the engagement party. So he and I were talking on the phone about the party, and maybe that sparked some kind of jealousy in him, me, that he was so possessive or obsessed with me. Maybe Conti's nature was that if I can't have Lark, nobody can have her.
The motive in this case was clear. Dick Conti was willing to do whatever it took to get Lark back. That meant taking out his competition. Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson got in his way.
Dick Conti had a motive for murder, but did he have the opportunity? He denies being in Arkansas that night.
Conti had told us that he was at another cabin that he owned in Duck Creek, Utah.
We were able to put together the last landline call he made at Duck Creek and then the first one he made again on Sunday.
Was that enough time for Conti to have killed 2 men over 1,300 miles away?
We seized his truck and we found adult diapers and a number of gas cans, which would have allowed him to drive to Arkansas back without having to stop for fuel or use the restroom.
We had the right gap in time that gave him enough time to drive to Conway and back.
The theory that Dick Conti is the killer is a compelling one, except for one major complication.
There was no physical evidence that put Dick Conti in that house that night. No hair, no fingerprints, no DNA left behind. And we had not been able to match any of the ballistics from the murder scene to any of the guns found in Dick's cabin.
The odds were stacked against us, but given all the circumstantial evidence that we had, we all believed Conti was responsible for killing these 2 people.
Dick Conti is jailed on kidnapping charges for abducting Lark.
Dick ended up pleading guilty to get a plea bargain. He got maximum time of 15 years for kidnapping my mom.
But prosecutors know that with good behavior, he could be released early. The pressure is on investigators to build a murder case against the doctor before he gets out.
The standard that we have to reach is beyond a reasonable doubt. A case like this is like a jigsaw puzzle. Reasonable doubt slips in pretty quickly.
9 years pass as investigators painstakingly seek out evidence to implicate Conti.
Even though I had been given other assignments, I continued to follow up, even if I had to do it on my own time.
Prosecutors hold off laying charges in hopes of building the strongest case possible. But Conti's release date is approaching.
Could the family handle us going to trial and him being found not guilty? That could happen.
If prosecutors fail, Lark and Ashley fear for what might happen to them if Dick walks free.
Dick murdered my father. He murdered Timmy Wayne. And if he could get to my mom, he's gonna kill her too. I was petrified of Dick. I was convinced that Dick would kill us.
Almost a decade has passed since Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson were brutally gunned down.
That long space of time felt like hell to me. You think it's over, but it's not over because you're just waiting for what's going to happen next.
The prime suspect, Dr. Dick Conti, has spent the last 9 years in a Nevada prison for kidnapping Carter's ex-wife, Lark. But he's about to be released.
My fear was there was a very good chance that if he was released, he could just disappear.
2 days before Dick is set to go free, prosecutors charge him with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The Nevada doctor is extradited to Arkansas to stand trial.
We had evidence, but unfortunately, a lot of it was circumstantial. You always have a little bit of a knot in your stomach as a prosecutor when you've got a case like this, especially one that's high profile.
But before Dick Conti even steps foot in a courtroom, a surprise witness comes forward.
A cellmate of Dick Conti said that Dick told him that yes, he had killed Carter Elliott, but that we couldn't prove it. And he also said they'll never find the murder weapon. To get information like this is always kind of a double-edged sword. Are they credible? Is a jury going to believe them?
The big thing was making sure that the jury found it credible. And so that meant that they weren't going to get anything in return for their testimony. At
trial, prosecutors present their case to the jury.
Dick Conti was a scorned lover, and that was our theory of the case. You know, he was in love with Lark, and he was willing to do anything he needed to do to keep her. And if that meant that Carter Elliott was a threat, then he had to eliminate the threat. Timmy Wayne Robertson, unfortunately, became a victim as well.
In front of the families of Timmy Wayne Robertson and Carter Elliott, prosecutors reveal how the crime unfolded.
Dick Conti went to the door, dressed in police tactical attire, and yelled, "Police, search warrant." Once they opened the door, he burst in, ordered them to the ground, and then had them place their hands behind their back, placed the folded towels on the back of Timmy Wayne's head, and immediately executed him. And then he turned around and did the same thing to Carter Elliott.
Dick Conti had planned it down to every detail so that he would be certain that the only things that were left at the scene was what he intended to leave at the scene. Some sort of a calling card in the form of an unspent bullet. I don't believe that was an accident.
The jury hears from a host of witnesses, including Lark and Ashley, who testify about Dick's relationship with Lark and how he kidnapped her.
The kidnapping spelled out what kind of motive he had and what he was capable of doing.
The defense argued that with a lack of DNA, with a lack of fingerprints, with a lack of a murder weapon, a case was just merely circumstantial. And they also said that there was no reason for Dick Conti, to commit these crimes.
On January 22nd, 2013, after only 40 minutes of deliberation, Dick Conti is found guilty of 2 counts of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison.
I felt relief. I felt like justice had been served, and I feel like he received the punishment that he deserved.
There was a relief. That there was some level of accountability and justice for the family and for our community, but also justice is a pretty poor substitute for the loss of a loved one.
For Ashley Elliott, the memory of her father and friend are not in how their lives ended, but in how they were lived.
If people think of my dad, I hope they focus on the positive things that he did in his life. He left a legacy behind, which is my brother, and myself, and our children. And he was a wonderful man. And Timmy Wayne, I just will never forget Timmy Wayne's smile. And he was just gentle and kind and just as country as they come. And I loved that about him. And he was just there anytime I needed him.
Beloved taxi driver.
Raphael was a hardworking guy. He always tried to do better and better and better.
Is murdered in cold blood.
That's when they observed a body inside of the trunk.
There were 9 gunshots. That's not an accident.
We had no leads. We had no suspects. Had no idea who could have done this to him.
Police uncover a sinister trail of motives.
A lot of people was jealous of Raphael.
Raphael tended to like the ladies a little bit.
Raphael had approximately $2,000 in his vehicle.
But struggled to find suspects.
People were asking, do we have to be scared? Is there a murder out there killing us Hispanics?
We noticed on his license plate of his vehicle, there appeared to be a blood stain.
Until the bizarre truth turns the case on its head.
We're calling him through the loudspeaker, trying to get him to come out of the house, which turned into an hours-long standoff.
When that fingerprint came back with a second person, it really blew it wide open.
We knew he was at the scene.
That was a bombshell. That was a game changer in terms of the criminal prosecution. Ultimately, to come back to these two people was something that we never saw coming.
Rogers County, Oklahoma, a quiet rural district north of Tulsa's city limits.
Rogers County is just a great, tight-knit community.
It's a agricultural community, a very wholesome, family-oriented community.
That all changes in the early hours of May 1st, 2015, when a truck driver sees something unusual beneath a bridge.
Our dispatch center received a call of a vehicle partially submerged in the Caney River off Highway 169.
Police and firefighters arrive at the scene in minutes and cordon off the area. Emergency crews check to see if anyone is trapped inside.
The news media was there, and it was being broadcasted over live TV.
As the car is towed onto the riverbank, its trunk pops open.
That's when they initially observed a body inside of the trunk.
At that point, we knew we had a serious crime at hand.
Rogers County Sheriff's detectives arrive and begin their investigation.
When I arrived on scene, I observed a Hispanic male inside of the trunk.
These pockets look like they've been rummaged through.
Only when detectives move the victim's shirt do they realize the violent nature of the attack.
He appeared to have several gunshot wounds to his chest area.
There were 9 gunshots. That's not an accident. 9 gunshots is intentional.
Somebody wanted to make sure that he did not survive his injuries.
The first question facing detectives is who is the man in the trunk?
We did not locate any type of identification or any wallet or anything that a normal person would have in his pockets.
So it made it very hard for us to identify who he was. We were taking photographs of his tattoos and unique markings on his body.
Inside of the vehicle, we found some cell phones.
As the car was submerged, we got lucky that one of the cell phones was placed on the dash and it was fully intact, still operational.
The detectives and forensics team comb the riverbank for further clues.
We noticed a large amount of blood, and we suspected that was the area that the victim was initially shot. Well, near that pool of blood, we also found some shell casings consistent with the size of bullet wounds inside the deceased body.
A few feet away, detectives notice more clues.
There was several beer cans and a cigarette butt and a piece of tissue.
I was told that a family member had showed up and seen his brother's car on the news, and he said, yes, that's my brother's car.
The young man's brother is Rafael Hernandez Torres, a taxi owner serving customers in Tulsa's Hispanic community.
I showed him a photograph of a tattoo that I had taken from the victim's body. That Oscar immediately identified the tattoo belonging to his brother and then began sobbing and crying because at that point we told him that his brother had been murdered.
It broke my heart. When I seen the pictures, it felt like the whole world just kind of ended.
Oscar called me. When I found out Rafael got shot, I didn't know how to react. I was just shocked. I was like, how?
Rafael Hernandez Torres was born outside Mexico City on October 22, 1976.
As a kid, he was a rebel.
Growing up, he was always riding his bike from town to town.
He loved to go and get to know people from other places, get to know other cities. He just loved to travel everywhere.
When Raphael was 20 years old, his parents moved him and his siblings to the U.S. As one of the oldest sons, Raphael helped support the family.
It was difficult to move to a different place that we didn't know, and we had to start from zero.
Raphael was the big brother. And as soon as we got here, Raphael told us to get straight to school, learn the language, and just keep on going. Raphael was a hardworking guy. He always tried to do better and better and better.
As a young man, Raphael's warm personality attracted others.
He was so friendly with everyone, especially ladies.
Raphael was enterprising too, turning his passion for travel into a career.
Raphael started his taxi business with one car. From there, it kept on going and going.
Raphael was known in Tulsa's Hispanic community as someone willing to help anyone in need.
Raphael cared about everybody. If he saw you down, he'll try to help you. If he saw you homeless, he'll get you a room and get you a shower and help you out.
He knew people who didn't have anything to eat, and he helped them out. Raphael had a great heart.
What would lead anyone to take Raphael's life so violently on that riverbank?
Everybody knew him. Everybody liked him. He did a service to his community, always gave back to his community. At this point, we're thinking, why would somebody kill him?
At the crime scene, detectives ask Oscar and Juan what they know about Raphael's last hours before his body was discovered in the river.
Raphael called me and told me that he was going to Texas. But the next day, he didn't call me, which was strange because he was always calling me every time he went out of state.
Police ask if Oscar and Juan know why anyone might want to kill their brother.
We learned that Raphael was known to carry approximately $2,000 on him at all times.
Whoever did this took his ID, took his wallet, took any money he may have had. So that led to the possible motive that Raphael had been killed for the money.
Oscar gives the detectives one more useful piece of information.
Oscar told us that some of Raphael's vehicles had been vandalized where Raphael ran his business.
A lot of people was jealous of Raphael because he was really successful in the business that he was doing.
Had the beloved taxi driver made a lethal enemy in his community?
We had no leads, we had no suspects, had no idea who could have done this to him.
This wasn't just a disagreement or something. It was a very violent act.
I had a lot of questions about Raphael. Why? Who? Why would they kill him? What did he do?
This is not a random killing. This is someone who targeted Raphael and wanted him to die.
Coming up, detectives uncover a tangled web of romantic interests.
Not only does he call her frequently and go by and see her, but I know he bought her flowers.
She had an unusual relationship with her ex-husband. They both still slept in the same bed.
So a scorned husband, that could fit right in with that. Now we're starting to think this could be a motive.
And a surprising lead sends the case in a new direction.
We were shocked when we found a second individual's fingerprint at the scene.
After discovering Rafael Hernandez Torres shot dead and stuffed into the trunk of his own taxicab, detectives are trying to establish if it was a robbery gone wrong or if he'd been targeted by someone with a grudge.
We were trying to see if we could locate who had vandalized Raphael's vehicles, see if there's anyone that had a motive or a reason to harm or murder Raphael.
Detectives are also on the lookout for vehicles spotted near the bridge on the night of the murder.
We established a tip line, and we got that number out to the news outlets.
We received multiple tips from passerbys describing that they saw a truck on the side of the highway, a black SUV on the side of the highway, and then a silver car on the side of the highway.
So we initially started looking for vehicles that could match that description in the hopes that we could run a name.
Next, investigators head to the heart of Tulsa's Latino district, where Raphael based his business.
The area of 21st and Garnett in Tulsa is a predominantly Latino community. Right at the heart of that is Santa Cecilia Plaza.
There's grocery stores, there's hair salons, ice cream parlors, where the Hispanic community gathers with their families.
The Plaza Santa Cecilia, it's a place to go if you're Hispanic most of the time. Something's always happening.
Rafael parked his vehicles outside of the Mercandito and also right next to the ice cream shop.
Rafael spent every day walking around talking to these people.
Rafael gave rides to people that needed them. He helped translate, and he's just well known in his community as a person always giving back and helping. Very kind and loving person.
Rafael always said that's what he loved to do. He loved, helping out people.
Detectives canvass Rafael's friends at the plaza.
They were shocked that he was murdered and killed. And they were heartbroken.
Was there anyone who had a reason to want him dead?
It was well known in that community that Rafael had money, that he carried money with him.
We spoke with Roman, who was considered a maintenance man around the area.
We spoke with Felipe, who owned a grocery store, as well as Adon, who ran the ice cream cart.
Adon came into contact with Rafael multiple times in a week as he pushed that cart up and down those businesses.
We actually learned that people seemed to really like Rafael. No one really seemed to have a motive to want to harm him.
As detectives continue searching the plaza for leads, they gain access to Rafael's cell phone records.
So initially, we had the physical phone. I drafted a search warrant to try to extract as much data as possible from that phone. Rafael was talking to multiple people between 9:15 and 9:30. So we know that he's alive at that point, or he wouldn't be answering his phone. And then after that time period, he doesn't answer any more phone calls.
It's always important when someone has been murdered to find out who they talked to last. One of the numbers that we had identified on Rafael's phone belonged to a female named Letty. Letty worked at a laundromat near where Rafael kept his vehicles. We found out through Oscar that Rafael and Letty may have had some type of relationship. Rafael would frequent Letty's place of business at the laundromat and would go by to see her.
Not only does he call her frequently and go by and see her, but I know he bought her flowers. He took little gifts up to her. He took her to Dallas one time for one of his fairs. They drove to Dallas and then drove right back.
There's one more thing about Letty that gets the officers' attention.
We also discovered that Letty was married.
As officers dig into this new lead, Rafael's autopsy results come in.
Rafael was shot 3 times in the front and 6 times in the back.
There's a mindset behind somebody shooting somebody that many times. It tells you that this is a crime of passion. It's not just something that just happened.
So a scorned husband, that could fit right in with that. Now we're starting to think this could be a motive.
Had Letty's husband killed Rafael in a jealous rage? Detectives decide to get some answers from Letty.
So we went to interview Letty, and Letty was not very forthcoming.
We had talked to her about her relationship with Rafael. What is that? What is that relationship? She told us that they were just friends.
Letty did deny being in a relationship with Rafael.
We learned after speaking with Letty that she had not been truthful to us. She did not provide a correct date of birth, did not provide her correct address.
At the station, detectives search Letty's name in the police database.
We later learned Letty's true address and her true date of birth. In doing so, we discovered that Letty had an outstanding warrant.
So obviously, we're on high alert with her because she's trying to deceive us.
Knowing that we've been lied to, we want to observe Letty's comings and goings, so we'd start conducting surveillance on Letty's home.
As detectives stake out Letty's home, their attention is drawn to a vehicle.
As we arrived, we saw a vehicle pull in that was almost an exact match to one of them mentioned in the tip line.
He's driving a black truck with a silver stripe on the back of it. and that was a possible vehicle we were looking for.
Detectives investigating the shooting of taxi driver Rafael Hernandez Torres believe his friendship with laundromat worker Letty could have sent her husband into a jealous rage.
First thing we decided to do when looking into Letty and her husband was we went to see who her husband's talking to.
Then a truck pulls up in Letty's driveway that matches a vehicle spotted near the scene of Rafael's murder.
So from there, we decided that we're going to make contact with the individual in the truck.
Officers confront the truck's owner, who claims to be the friend of Letty's husband, Mario.
Rogelio was basically crashing on Mario and Letty's couch, and they were putting him up for several weeks.
While speaking with Rogelio, we noticed on his license plate of his vehicle that there appeared to be a blood stain.
And there's a bloody fingerprint on the tag of the truck. Looking under the truck, and there's a piece of tissue that is kind of consistent with tissue that we found at the scene.
Is this the evidence detectives have been searching for? They search the house and see what else they can find.
During the search of that home, we did find a firearm inside the home. We submitted that to the state crime lab.
We had a victim that had been killed, put into the trunk of his vehicle, and then that vehicle was subsequently pushed into the river. It was a very narrow window of time that all this happened in. So in most of the investigators' mind, it's a very good possibility that there's two people involved in this. Well, we got what we believe could be the possible vehicle. We have evidence that Letty's husband and this friend of his could be our suspects. And we're thinking this is the big crack to the case that we've been looking for.
Police bring Mario and Rogelio in for questioning. They ask Mario about Rafael. Had the taxi driver's advances on Letty made him a target?
Mario was familiar with that Rafael had bought his wife flowers and was known to stop by her place of business frequently, but he did not seem to be very upset by that.
Mario insists that he was never jealous of Rafael because he and Letty are divorced.
We discovered that Letty had an unusual relationship with her ex-husband. They both still lived in the same house. They lived there with their children. They even slept in the same bed.
She was kind of out seeing people. He didn't care.
Mario also insists that he was at home asleep on the night of the murder. Rogelio gives the same alibi, insisting that he never left the house that night.
Their alibis were not really solid. We were worried about them being co-conspirators, so at the time, we weren't putting just a whole lot of stock into that.
Officers press Rogelio about the blood on his license plate.
But we talked to him about the blood on it, and he's got a good excuse for that. He cut his finger trying to put the tag on, and the bloody fingerprint is his blood. They were more than willing to provide their DNA and fingerprints to clear themselves.
Despite officers' suspicion of Mario and Rogelio, the lab results tell a different story.
We have DNA from the scene, and Rogelio and Mario don't possess that DNA.
The firearm inside the home did not match bullets that we found in Rafael.
And based on their phone numbers, they weren't at the scene. We found zero evidence linking them to the crime, and that whole theory really started to fall apart quick. We were going back to the drawing board and we were starting over again.
We weren't sure on where to go from here other than talking to the community. It was very frustrating during this point.
With each passing day, pressure to solve the case is only increasing.
People were asking, do we have to be scared? Is there a murder out there killing us Hispanics?
My whole family was worried because they didn't want me doing the taxing business because they didn't want me to be the same as my brother.
At a crossroads in the investigation, police find a new way forward when they gain access to further cell phone records from the night of the murder.
One of the last contacts that Rafael had was a fare that was supposed to be getting a ride to Texas later that night, and Rafael never showed up.
But there's one other number that we know is also communicating with Rafael at around the time of his death.
Rafael was scheduled to pick up an individual and told him that he was going to be late because he had another job.
Rafael had told him that he was going to help a friend who had gotten into an accident, and he was going to go translate for him to the police. We know that phone conversation took place around 9:15, and we believe that around 9:35 that Rafael was murdered.
Had Rafael been lured to his death by a call from someone he knew?
As we start diving into the call detail records on that phone number, we're able to follow the tower information and the location of that phone to the scene of the crime.
We were able to track Rafael's phone and the suspect phone, both going to the same area. However, Rafael's phone didn't leave, and the suspect phone went back to Tulsa.
This was very important to us because we knew that this was the possible killer that enticed Rafael to where he ultimately was shot and killed.
That's when we make the decision to focus everything on that number.
When police try to identify the phone's owner, there's a problem.
We get subscriber information for the phone number, and it comes back to a fictitious name.
The number was on a prepaid phone. It wasn't attached to any particular person.
That number was very important to us, especially after seeing the lengths that the individual went to hide their identity. We felt very strong that this number was going to belong to the killer.
So investigators had to start looking at other ways of identifying who this phone belonged to.
We started to get call detail records for that number.
And they started contacting people that were in contact with the cell phone.
We were able to pinpoint a phone number from someone that talked to the suspect phone several times close to the time of the killing.
The phone number belongs to a man named Marco Lara.
But once we got the name from Marco Lara, we started running a criminal history check, and we find the drug charges, some firearms charges, stuff that we were interested in when you're looking for a violent killer. We knew that Marco knew who possessed our bad guy's phone number because he had been calling it.
Marco ran with some of the same people in that area that Rafael had contact with. And so we really felt like Marco was going to be a good spot to gain some information.
We went to the area of the plaza. Marco lived one street over, and we staked out his house. We saw a truck pull into his driveway, and he gets out of the driver's seat, and he walks into the house. So we get out, and we start covering exits to make sure that he isn't leaving. But that's when things went south.
2 weeks after cab driver Rafael Hernandez Torres is found shot dead in the trunk of his car, police are about to confront Marco Lara, a man they believe may know the identity of the killer.
We went there to make contact with Marco. He refused to come to the door.
We're calling him out through the loudspeaker, trying to get him to come out of the house, which turned into a standoff. We established a phone connection. There was a woman and children in the house, his family, and we're requesting for him to come out. And this goes on for a long time. Eventually, his wife and children come out, and we believe, that it's just him in the home.
There was a several-hour standoff with him in which he ultimately gave up and came outside and surrendered.
Police take Marco into custody and begin their interrogation.
Initially, we were thinking, this is a bad guy. He's got criminal history. He's actively resisting us coming and arresting him. We're thinking, okay, this could very well be an associate of our killer, if not possibly involved.
But cell tower phone records prove otherwise.
But once we got him arrested, we were able to determine that his phone as well had not traveled to the area where Rafael was killed.
If Marco is not involved, then why had he resisted arrest?
He has an outstanding warrant.
He's doing whatever he can to keep from going to jail.
No longer a direct suspect, Marco still has information valuable to the investigation.
So we had seized his phone. We had his phone. I typed in our suspect's number, and he said, that's him.
That number belonged to Roman Medrano, who lived in Tulsa.
Marco provided us the apartment complex that Roman lived at.
So knowing that Roman Medrano was the owner of that phone, we sat at the apartment complex and we figured out what apartment he was in.
And the next morning, we served a search warrant on that apartment.
When detectives search the apartment where Roman Medrano lives with his wife Blanca, they're surprised by what they find.
As we entered the residence, I noticed there was no furniture. It appeared that Roman maybe didn't have a lot of money. Maybe he was struggling to pay his bills.
We find that there's very little in the way of furniture, and it looks like things are being sold off. There's IRS paperwork scattered about.
Searching through Blanca's purse, officers make a discovery that raises their suspicions further.
There was approximately $2,000 in her purse. Rafael had approximately $2,000, in his vehicle. And now our suspect's wife has this large sum of money in her purse that is pretty close to the amount.
We had the one suspect number that we had determined to belong to Roman Medrano. At that point, we felt we had enough to bring Roman and his wife in for questioning.
At the police station, detectives first interview Roman's wife, Blanca.
Blanca initially denied knowing who Rafael was.
Blanca told us that she was not given a ride by Rafael, that Roman has nothing to do with this.
Then how to explain the $2,000 in her purse?
Roman doesn't have any money. He's worried about losing his roof over his head. It's well known in the community that Rafael carries lots of cash with him. So I don't think it was any secret that by killing Rafael that Roman could get a payday out of that. Blanca basically told us that Roman was with her the night of the homicide, that he's always home.
In another interview room, detectives question Roman.
Roman told us that he did not know Rafael, that he didn't know that his wife knew Rafael, that he had never been to the area where the homicide occurred. Roman denied every aspect of any knowledge of the case whatsoever.
Roman just heard of Rafael's taxi service and that he was, doing work in the Hispanic community.
But detectives have information that suggests a closer connection.
Shortly after the first interview with Marco, he reached out to us and gave us more information about Roman. Marco told us that he had overheard Roman and another individual talking about how Rafael had given Roman's wife, Blanca, a ride in this taxi cab to the Tulsa County Jail.
Pressed further, Roman admits to knowing more about Rafael than he first let on.
Rafael had a successful business and tended to like the ladies a little bit.
Roman did not like the fact that she was taking rides with Rafael.
He still wasn't willing to tell us that he was, at the scene of the crime.
Confronted with Roman's admission that she'd taken rides with Rafael, Blanca's story begins to change.
Now she knows Rafael. She's telling us that they had talked, they knew of each other.
Blanca began to tell us that during one of her rides with Rafael, that he came on to her and that she believed that it was inappropriate and told Roman about it.
We had learned that Rafael had made comments to Blanca as trying to hit on her, and that this was very upsetting to Roman. Blanca described Roman as a very jealous man.
Had something happened between Rafael and Blanca that triggered Roman to seek revenge?
Based on how many times they were shot, there was a personal element to this. We believe that Rafael's conduct towards Roman's wife could have been a motive to kill him. At this point in the investigation, we definitely feel like we have our guy.
"17 days after Rafael Hernandez Torres' murder, police are investigating husband and wife, Roman and Blanca Medrano.
There were two angles that led us to Roman. One was jealousy. We knew that Roman was aware of Rafael giving a ride to Blanca.
Roman believed that Rafael disrespected his wife by coming on to her as she described, which would indicate a motive behind Rafael's killing.
But we also knew that Roman was struggling financially. And we had every reason to believe that Roman would know that Rafael carried money with him.
We definitely feel like we've got probable cause to arrest him. We feel like we have our guy. We don't know if there's another individual at this point, but we know we've got at least one of them.
Under questioning, the couple remains adamant in their denials.
Roman would never come out and tell us the truth.
Roman told us that he had never been to the area where the homicide occurred. Blanca gives us an alibi for Roman and says that he's at the house with her. We knew that wasn't true because it was Roman's cell phone that was at the scene. We got the overlay of suspect location from the cell towers. We knew the possessor of that phone was involved in this killing.
Was it possible that someone else had Roman's phone on the night of the murder?
We had the evidence from the cell phone that Roman talked to Blanca 20 times the night of the homicide. If you're sitting right next to him, why are you calling him that many times? And she says, I'm not. So things started to change. Now we have actual evidence from, the mouth of his own wife that what he's saying isn't true. So to this point, we have a very compelling circumstantial case. We've got the cell phone records. We have motive.
Police take Roman's fingerprints and swab him for DNA.
And then we get the information back from their crime lab, and we find DNA from the scene on a beer bottle that belongs to Roman Medrano.
The DNA evidence that came back to Roman Medrano really firmed up the case against him. It went from a very circumstantial case to a really good case.
Police are ready to charge Roman with murder, but know the case is far from airtight.
There was no murder weapon. We didn't have an eyewitness to it. We knew that proving it in court was going to be very difficult to do.
Then, as detectives go back carefully over forensic reports from the state crime lab, they find something unexpected.
We were shocked when we found a second individual's fingerprint at the scene.
When that fingerprint came back with a second person, it really blew it wide open.
This fingerprint affirmed our suspicion that there was more than one person involved in the killing.
That was a bombshell. That was a game changer in terms of the criminal prosecution, because now we had an eyewitness.
That print came back to a guy by the name of Adon Mora. Adon Mora was a member of the community there in the plaza.
This fingerprint came back from the Department of Homeland Security when Adon Mora was deported previously.
Adon Mora was known as the Ice Cream Man.
When I found out that the Ice Cream Man was involved, it was a shock because you don't expect someone to be that person.
Why would Rafael's friend, the ice cream vendor, turn against him?
We knew he was at the scene. We knew he knew the victim. We knew he knew the other suspect. Marco Lara told us that Adon and Roman were pretty tight. I mean, they spent a lot of time together.
The consensus amongst the investigators is that it was more than likely a two-reason motive. One, they were in dire straits, needing money. And two, that Rafael had disrespected Roman in talking to his wife, Blanca. At that point, we issued a warrant for Adon Mora. However, we did not have a location as where he was at.
We spoke with an individual that told us that he had gotten scared about a criminal investigation and that he had went up north.
But we did find that he was on Facebook. We wrote a search warrant to Facebook, and Facebook provided us a probable location of Adon.
We were able to locate those IP addresses into a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. It gave us about a 3-block area.
Detectives contact U.S. Marshals, who take Adon into custody within a matter of hours.
I read Adon his rights. While speaking with him, he acted as if he was not close to Raphael in any way. When I asked him specifically if he had been to the area of the Caney River, he stopped the interview and requested that his attorney be present.
Hearing of Adon's arrest, Roman requests another interview with police.
During that interview, Roman was trying to give me scenarios where Adon had perpetrated this crime, and Roman was just trying to give him a ride, had no idea what was going on.
Told that Roman has pinned the blame on him, Adon decides to cooperate and tell his side of the story.
Adon eventually agrees to speak with us and said that Roman had owed him money and that he had a way to get him his money back.
Adon says that the night of the homicide, Roman tells him that he needs Adon to come with him and that he was going to get him the money. So Adon gets in the vehicle with Roman. Roman stops. They get a pack of beer and they drive down to the riverbank of the Caney River.
Had Adon just signed on to help Roman kill Raphael? If so, which one of them fired the gun?
There's a lot of things that we don't know at this point.
We had two people that we could put at the crime scene, but we didn't know who the trigger man was.
We felt confident that we could prove that Roman Medrano was there and was a part of the crime, but Roman was trying to give me scenarios where Adon had perpetrated this crime. Adon is doing his best he can to separate himself from the crime.
It's extremely important for the family members that we get justice for them. This was an incredibly violent crime, and we wanted the person that pulled that trigger.
When I found out Raphael was slurred out because someone needed help, it was just horrible. Why would you lie to him like that?
We wanted a conviction for the community, for the family, so we requested that Adon take a polygraph. There's no way that we can give Raphael back, but what we can do is solve the crime and send the perpetrators to prison.
Police now have two suspects in custody for the shooting of Rafael Hernandez Torres, Roman Medrano, and Adon Mora Ramos.
Ultimately, to come back to these two people was something that we never saw coming.
Adon's unexpected involvement in the murder gives police a valuable way to secure a conviction. To ensure he's telling the truth, police have Adon submit to a polygraph test.
During the interview with Adon, he explained to us that Roman wanted him to be at a certain location to help him with a job of some sort.
They went out to the area where the homicide had occurred, and they were there drinking some beer and just hanging out.
Adon doesn't really know what's going on. He's asking Roman, what are we doing? How are we going to get this money? Well, Roman keeps walking off, and he's on the phone. He makes a phone call where Adon can't hear him. After a period of time, Adon sees Raphael's silver car pulling down where they're at.
Raphael believed that he was going to help a friend who had gotten into an accident.
It was Roman's cell phone that made the call to lure Raphael out to the rural secluded area.
According to Adon, Raphael drank a few beers with them, and then Roman asked for his help jump-starting his car.
Roman directed Raphael's vehicle to pull down and give him a jump. Roman tells Adon to take the jumper cables and hook them up to the cars.
Adon tells investigators that what happened next took him by surprise.
Adon is trying to hook up the cables under the hood of the car, and he hears the gunshots. He looks up and says that he sees Roman standing over Raphael, and that Raphael has been shot several times. Adon fingers Roman as the triggerman, as the actual killer.
The polygraph test confirms that Adon is telling the truth.
That was the last piece of evidence that we needed. The information that he gave was truthful. And it became clear that Roman was really the one that had a personal vendetta against Raphael and the financial motive for it. But we knew Adon participated. We knew he helped out with it. Adon admitted that he put Rafael's body in the trunk and helped push the vehicle into the river. And Adon said he was afraid that Roman was going to shoot him as well.
Adon never says anything about the money. Adon just says he's worried that he's going to be next. Now, he's a witness to this crime.
And so Adon, because of that fear, fled the area shortly after the crime had happened. Ultimately, we charged Adon with accessory and gave him a 15-year sentence. Adon was there. He could have stopped this, and he didn't. He could have cooperated, and he didn't. So he needed to go to prison. Roman entered a plea of no contest to murder in the first degree, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
When this investigation started, it was a true whodunit. We weren't certain on who was involved or why they would want Rafael killed.
For such a violent act to be committed over a couple $1,000s and an offhand comment to Roman's wife is unexplainable.
It was a cruel and unusual way of getting back at somebody for being jealous and wanting the things that he had.
Rafael was a generous man, a benevolent man, and they took advantage of that. They knew that he would be willing to help them, and they used that good nature against him and ultimately lured him out there and murdered him.
My whole family felt relieved because we finally got justice from my brother, Rafael, because his dad didn't go in vain.
My feeling and thought about these people was always like, why? Why? What problem did they have with Rafael? I don't know.
Today, the Hernandez-Torres family does everything they can to keep Rafael's memory alive.
Rafael was like a role model for everybody. He was the biggest role model for me because he showed me, even when I'm down, to always get up and fight for what I like.
We just love for Rafael to be remembered as a crazy, funny, flirtatious guy who thought of helping other people. It's always something or someone who remembers Rafael and talk about his life, and we just all start crying. And we wish he was still here, but he's still with us.
An outgoing and vivacious mother.
Everybody that met her loved her. She would make everyday fun.
She was vibrant, happy. She was the life of the party.
Is savagely murdered.
The level of brutality that was involved in the actual murder was just shocking. Her throat was slashed almost to the point where she was decapitated.
Police hunt for an elusive killer.
We had nothing to tell us what happened. Crime scene evidence produced basically nothing.
We couldn't figure out who did it and why they did it. We were really baffled.
Could have been anybody.
And follow a twisted trail of evidence.
Why would he use a calling card?
There were 44 phone calls made up until the day of the murder.
The officer found a loaded handgun and hollow point bullets. It kind of lit up like a light bulb.
Until a desperate move.
This was really the one shot that the police had to solve this case.
Reveals a secret that stuns everyone.
I was very surprised, I was shocked. All of us were. I never would have expected that it would lead to this.
At 10:27 p.m. on a cold Tuesday in January 2003, Ramapo Police Dispatch receives an emergency call.
911. My neighbor just ran in my house and said his wife is on the floor in the house. He's here and he's sort of like in a state of shock. Let me talk to him on the phone. All right, hold on a minute. Yes. Sir, I have help on the way. You stay right where you are until the officers get there. Do you know if your wife is breathing?
No. She didn't
answer me. Did you check to see if she was okay? I walked into her room, the lights don't go on. Okay, does she have any injuries? Yes, she's got blood on her. Where? When I cried, Evelyn, 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 she didn't move. Did you come home and find her that way? I just came home.
Officers are dispatched to the home, located in a quiet family neighborhood.
When I initially approached the house, I see a man with a young boy with this really blank face. Walking by, he didn't say anything to me. I noticed that he had a shopping bag. It looked like a gallon of milk. I enter the home and go upstairs to the back rear bedroom to give this woman aid, only to find that I was at the scene of a murder. You know, her injuries were so severe. She's clearly dead. She's a very deep laceration to her neck, and she has what appears to be a knife handle sticking out of her chest. And the blood is just pooled around her body. To me, it looked like the blood was still moving. And I was thinking to myself, this just happened. It could be that the killer's still in the house. So myself and another police officer went room by room and cleared the house, and we didn't find anybody else inside. At that point now, I had to secure the crime scene. I knew that it was dark, but once it's a crime scene, you try not to touch anything because you don't know what is evidence.
Detectives arrive on the scene and begin their investigation in the bedroom.
The victim was lying on her back, and she had a tremendously deep wound to her neck. So deep so, you could see part of her spine. There appeared to be 2 stab wounds to her chest, and there was a large, I would call it a kitchen knife, sticking in her chest. We, of course, dusted the knife for fingerprints, which came back negative.
The actual blade had gone through her and was stuck into the parquet wood floor. You know, it was a pretty brutal scene.
She didn't appear to be dead for long. Her body was cold to the touch, but there was no rigor mortis. There was no lividity. We looked at a potential attack of a sexual nature. There was nothing obvious to the eye. Her clothing was not disturbed. I looked for any defensive wounds. If there was a struggle, there'd be some indication on her hands, and none of that was evident.
The brutality of her injuries and how many times she had been stabbed, it looked more like what we would call a crime of passion.
Looking around the room, investigators discover some unusual clues.
I found it kind of odd that there was no lights, but the fan in the ceiling was running. The fan light had no light bulbs in it. And in the garbage basket were 3 light bulbs, and there was 1 on the floor next to it. And I'm like, that just, what's this all about? And there was a wall sconce that had a light bulb that was loosened. To me, it would be indicative of somebody looking to hide their presence, lessen the ability of the victim to see them.
The house was a little bit in disarray, but it didn't look like it had been ransacked or that it was part of a burglary.
There was some expensive tools in the garage. There was quite a bit of silverware, which is a burglar. They would take that, I would think.
Nothing really of value was taken, and so that started raising more questions of what exactly happened here.
Police examine the exterior of the house for evidence.
We didn't see any types of breaks in the windows or the screens. Everything appeared to be locked and secure. On the ground, you could see a set of footprints in the snow that led to the back door. And that door wasn't broken open, but it was open just slightly. That could have been a point of entry for whoever had done this to her.
Investigators speak with the homeowner, Peter Visich. He tells police the victim is his wife, 36-year-old Evelyn Visich, and that they live in the house with their 2-year-old son, Ryan.
Peter told the police he'd gotten home with his son and that he observed that something happened to his wife. When the police spoke to Peter and explained to him what exactly happened to his wife, Evelyn, it was a strange reaction.
He just sort of had a very stale face. That was something that was odd to me, but it certainly didn't point any fingers at him. There was no blood and nothing in his hands or on him or on his clothes that would indicate that he had been part of the murder.
While Peter is taken to headquarters to make a statement, Ryan is looked after by his grandparents. At the crime scene, investigators continue to look for any clues to who has killed Evelyn Visage.
In these early stages, you don't really know the victim, and so now you have to start thinking, who would do that, and what was the reason for this brutality that was leveled against this victim?
Born to a single mother in Lares, Puerto Rico in 1966, Evelyn grew up determined to escape her humble childhood.
She came to this country from Puerto Rico when she was 19 to live the American dream.
Evelyn landed a job at a large home improvement store in Paramus, New Jersey, where she made an immediate impression.
Evelyn was a great employee. She had such a good work ethic. Everybody loved her.
She was vibrant, positive. You could hear Evelyn from a mile away. She was always happy. She loved her music. She was passionate about dancing. She was a proud Latina.
She was beautiful inside and out. Such a giving person. She was very kind.
Evelyn started dating Peter after they met at the store.
Peter used to shop there with his father. He was very quiet, very polite, family-oriented. He seemed like a good guy. Someone that she could see building a family with. That was her dream.
Peter and Evelyn married and soon welcomed their son Ryan into the family.
Ryan was her world. Everyone knew she had a son, and everyone knew how much she loved her son.
After 4 years of marriage, the couple's relationship deteriorated, and Evelyn filed for divorce.
Things started to go wrong. They were just very disconnected. But she wanted Peter to be a part of Ryan's life while they figured out their divorce and custody agreement.
But Evelyn was killed before the divorce was finalized, raising police suspicions due to the nature of her murder.
The ferocity, the level of violence, you would think somebody really had an axe to grind, someone that's personally involved with the victim.
You looked at the nature of the crime, it suggested that it was somebody doing this for a reason. You have a couple who are going through a divorce. In these types of cases, you're going to look at the husband.
Coming up, police discover additional suspects.
We learned that he had been with Evelyn the night of the murder.
Maybe they were having a domestic argument, a dispute.
And unearth hidden evidence.
Evelyn had secretly audio taped some of the arguments and fights that they had been having.
But just as the investigation falters,
maybe he wasn't the one who actually did the murder because it just doesn't make sense.
Was there a piece of the puzzle that we weren't seeing?
A new face blows the case wide open.
He's perspiring heavily. I could see the vein in his neck beating. And I said to him, I said, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I already know what happened, and I'm going to prove it.
Police investigating the murder of mother of one, Evelyn Visage, have their first suspect, her estranged husband, Peter Visage.
You have to start thinking, did the husband do this, or is he involved in it somehow?
Peter mentioned that his relationship with Evelyn was troubling to him because they were in a different place. He wanted her to stay home, she wanted to work, and the relationship deteriorated, and Evelyn had filed for divorce.
Evelyn and Peter still lived in the same home, even though this divorce was proceeding. They slept in separate bedrooms, but they were living under the same roof.
Peter claims he last saw Evelyn alive the morning she was killed.
He had taken his son for the day. Evelyn had gone to work.
Peter told us he went to his mother's house at 8:30 that morning with Ryan to do some household repairs. He didn't have a steady job. His parents supported him. He also did a lot of odd jobs for them that they paid him for. He stayed at his mother's house till approximately 8:30, and at that time he went with his son Ryan to the Palisades Mall.
Peter tells police that just after 9 p.m., he called Evelyn's cell, and she told him she was at a friend's house.
She told Peter that she was on her way home and would probably be home within 20 minutes or so. At approximately 10 p.m., Peter received a telephone call from Evelyn asking where he was. Peter said to Evelyn that he was picking up milk and that he would be home shortly. Peter said that upon arriving home, his intent was to put Ryan to bed, but he said that he found it odd that the lights were not working in the hallway. He said he looked into the bedroom, he saw that Evelyn was on the floor, and he said that she was obviously deceased, according to him, and he ran back downstairs and ran to the neighbor's house to call the police.
Peter Visage was questioned for over 16 hours. I mean, it was a very long interview. He never asked to leave. He never said, you know, I want a lawyer, leave me alone, anything like that. He was cooperative throughout.
He agreed to provide us with fingernail clippings, hair samples, blood sample, a buccal swab for his DNA.
As Peter is providing samples, investigators run a background check.
There was nothing in his history indicative of this violence. Peter was typically a guy who was, if he wasn't home, working on cars, motorcycles, he was at his parents' house. Peter Visage's mother confirmed his alibi for the day and evening at the time that he said that he was there. We found Peter to be at the A&P supermarket buying milk and exiting the store consistent with the times he described, confirmed by video cameras. And he produced a receipt for the milk, time and date stamped 10:15 p.m. The amount of time it took to go from A&P, where he purchased the milk, to his house, it just would not have been possible to commit that crime and call the police from the neighbor's phone and not be contaminated in some sort or leave behind some evidence or have evidence on him. We found no sign of any injuries. We found no sign of any blood on his person, on his shoes.
At this point in the investigation, there was nothing that we could find that was showing that Peter Visage was involved in the murder of his wife. He was in all these different places where there were surveillance cameras, and with a timeline that prevented him from being at the scene of the murder when it occurred. Now you have to start thinking, other than Peter Visage, who could do something like this, and why would they do something like this?
I asked him, did he have any concern about his own safety? You know, somebody came into your house, maybe they were looking for you too. Does he have any enemies? Does he owe anybody money? Does he have any illegal habits, drugs, gambling? And he answered no to all those questions. And I asked him if he knew anybody that might want to do this. And he said that she did have a boyfriend and that we should look at him. Evelyn was dating another employee of Home Depot, Mike Granda.
Here you have people going through a divorce, and now you have a boyfriend thrown into the mix.
A motive could be jealousy, could be a fight in their relationship. The fact that she still lives with Peter could be a source of upsetment for Mike Granda.
Maybe it was a jealous boyfriend who had come in there. It fit the profile for the crime scene, being that it was so horrific.
The next morning, police head to Evelyn's work to interview her boyfriend, Mike, and find that her coworkers already suspect something is wrong.
I remember I kept calling her because Evelyn was always at work by the time I got there, and she wasn't there that day. I saw detectives when they came in, and I got suspicious. And I said, something happened to Evelyn, right? So the detective said to me, how would you know that? So what I said was, you just confirmed it to me.
We interviewed Evelyn's co-workers, and to a person, they all loved her and spoke highly of her. And she had some very close relationships with people that she worked with that loved her dearly, that she was good to them, they were good to her, they looked out for each other.
Evelyn was very, very loved at work. Emotionally, it was horrible. I mean, we were her friends. We were her family.
She wasn't just a friend, like she was like a big sister to me.
As investigators speak with Evelyn's coworkers, her boyfriend, Mike Granda, arrives to start his shift.
When Mike Granda arrived for work, we told him that Evelyn had been murdered. He was visibly upset.
But when detectives ask Mike where he was the night before, his answer raises eyebrows.
According to Mike Granda, he had been with Evelyn the night of the murder.
At that point, you have to really look at every possibility. Maybe she was going back to her husband. Maybe she had broken up with him. Maybe it was a crime of passion. Maybe they were having a domestic argument, a dispute. We had to look at him as a possible suspect for the murder.
Police hunting the killer of Evelyn Visage are focusing in on the man she was dating while in the throes of divorcing her husband.
We did look at Evelyn's boyfriend, Mike Granda. There could be a source of jealousy based on the fact that she still lives with her husband during this process, so he has to be looked at.
Detectives bring the 28-year-old to the station for questioning.
When Michael Granda was interviewed, we asked him to describe their relationship. He said initially they were just friends, but as time went on, they became romantically involved and began dating.
Investigators press Mike for details on the night that Evelyn was killed.
According to Mike Granda, Evelyn and he had left Home Depot at approximately 3 p.m. Evelyn had gone to the Garden State Plaza Mall to return some clothes, and she actually was supposed to be having dinner with her son that night. But Peter called Evelyn and said, "I'm going to my mother's house with the baby." So Evelyn called Michael saying that she was free, so she went from the shopping mall to Michael Granda's house in West New York, New Jersey.
Mike claims he and Evelyn had dinner. Around 9 p.m., Peter called to say he was on his way back with Ryan, after which Evelyn decided to head home to see her son.
Michael Granda's house is approximately a 40-minute drive to the Visage house. Michael Granda called her when she was approximately 20 minutes from home when she was on the Garden State Parkway. Approximately 40 minutes after that phone call, Evelyn was being murdered. We asked him to describe his whereabouts. He said that he had stayed home for the rest of the night, watched TV, and went to bed. So there was a window of opportunity where he did not have an alibi that could be corroborated by someone else. We subpoenaed his phone records to try to determine where he was. Michael's cell phone records indicated that his cell phone was in his apartment or very close by his apartment in West New York, New Jersey. If he were to drive from West New York, in all likelihood, he would have to pass through a toll. We subpoenaed toll records, Easy Pass records. We subpoenaed some cameras, video records from some banks in the area looking for his car passing by, and none of that was ever found. So that also led us to believe that he was telling the truth. He actually was in his home at the time that Evelyn was being murdered.
I never thought for 1 second that Mike had anything to do with it. Mike really lifted her up on a pedestal. He gave her that support that she needed. Mike made her feel beautiful.
Michael was most cooperative. He offered his phone. He offered his laptop computer. He offered samples of his blood, a buccal swab for DNA, hair. He offered everything. He said, "Please, I know you have to look at me, cross me off the list and find out who did this."
It just never even dawned on me that the police would look at me. I just tried to give them as much information as I could. I do remember telling them, like, "Oh, I know you guys have to suspect me." I told them if they wanted to search my house, they could. If they wanted to search my cars, they could. I was just very focused on trying to be helpful.
After the police obtained all of the information from Mike and speaking with him and speaking with others, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect in the murder of Evelyn Visage. And there was just nothing to suggest that Peter Visage was involved. So if you don't believe the husband's involved, you don't believe the boyfriend's involved, you have to look at other individuals that may be involved.
At that point, it could have been anybody. You can't make assumptions on who it could be. You have to really look at every possibility.
The day after Evelyn's murder, as police consider possible suspects, news of the crime hits the airwaves.
The Evelyn Visage murder was newsworthy just because of the area.
We're in a small town. We don't have that many murders that it's commonplace.
This was a case that really was troubling because you have a woman who was violently, brutally killed, and we couldn't figure out who did it and why they did it.
Hoping for a new lead, investigators look to the autopsy report to learn more about the crime.
She had 2 stab wounds in her upper back area. Those were the initial strikes. And then she had a very deep slash wound to her throat. And then there were 2 stab wounds in her upper chest area, powerfully done as indicative by the fact that the knife was stuck in the floor. Based on what the medical examiner described to us, I could only imagine the sheer horror that Evelyn was experiencing.
The level of brutality that was involved in the actual murder was just shocking. Her throat was slashed almost to the point where she was decapitated. It was blood-curdling.
She must have been scared. Somebody's in her home. She's in her bedroom. Maybe it was a burglary gone bad and she came home and had startled whoever was in her house.
We circle back to examining parolees in the area, both New York and New Jersey, sex offenders, people that have committed similar crimes, burglaries gone bad or robberies gone bad. At the time of Evelyn Visich's murder, there was a group of young men who were committing robberies and burglaries in the vicinity, including a Terrence Monk, who lived approximately 5 miles from the Visich residence.
I do remember that we were having burglaries in the area, and I remember that we were having home invasions too. The name Terrence Monk, like it clicked with me.
There were cases, robberies, burglaries, and assaults where Terrence Monk committed violent acts on people that didn't cooperate. He was also implicated in a robbery probably 1.5 miles from the Visich house. It kind of lit up like a light bulb. He certainly went right up to the top of the list.
Evelyn Visich was killed in her own bedroom in a frenzied knife attack. And now, police are investigating if a violent local burglar might be responsible.
Terrence Monk was like a known criminal, and the detectives had been dealing with him for years at that point.
We had been investigating him so arduously and for such a long time, there was not any possibility of cooperation on his behalf.
To get the information they need, investigators take a different approach.
I utilized a confidential informant to try to determine where Terrence Monk was and if, in fact, he was involved in this crime. He described to me where Terrence Monk was at the time that Evelyn was murdered. He told us that Terrence Monk was in Buffalo, New York, and that was substantiated by witness statements and his cell phone records.
It's another dead end for detectives. They press the informant for any other information that might help solve the case.
This young man was so plugged in the criminal community, so I asked him what the word on the street was. If it was a local guy, chances are, in the criminal community, somebody would have been talking. And he said there's nothing on the street at all. No information about who killed Evelyn Visich.
With no other leads, police re-canvass the neighborhood around the Visich home.
There was multiple attempts to locate witnesses, and detectives actually went back and conducted a road stop in the area, hoping that somebody may have seen something. Nothing was discovered, and we couldn't gain anything from that. In the village of Chestnut Ridge, it's prohibited to park a vehicle on the street at night. So we also checked to see if any parking tickets had been issued, or any vehicles parked on the street, and there were none found.
Collectively, between the police and the prosecution, we were really sitting there thinking this may never get solved.
While investigators consider their next move, Evelyn's loved ones struggle to accept her loss.
I just couldn't believe that she was killed. Evelyn was such a loved person by everyone. Something like that happening to her, it makes no sense.
You know, there's some people that come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. That's what they say. There was a lot of respect and love there.
She would make like everyday fun, always laughing, having a good time. But, you know, that's life. I mean, you have to take every second you get because you never know when it's going to end.
Detectives re-interview Evelyn's friends and colleagues, hoping to uncover a tiny detail that leads them to her killer.
We did speak to many of Evelyn's friends to find out if she had a lifestyle that was potentially dangerous to her or would expose her to this type of demise.
Her life revolved around her being a mother.
She had no enemies.
Everybody that met her loved her. There was not one person that met her that did not instantly take to her. She was just a really pleasant person to be around all the time, day and night.
It was very puzzling. What happened and why was this done?
With a violent killer still on the streets, concern spreads through the community.
In this area, this little hamlet of Chestnut Ridge, it's just not that kind of an area where you would expect anything like this. People in the community are starting to get fearful.
I remember I was living alone, and I certainly had my radar up. And I was very careful coming and going, almost to the point of paranoia. I wasn't going to be a victim.
3 days after Evelyn's murder, detectives receive explosive new information, turning the investigation on its head.
Mike Granda came to the Round Pole police station with some personal items of Evelyn Visage's. Amongst those personal items, we found audio tapes and a journal that she wrote in.
Detectives immediately recognized the voices on the audio tapes as Evelyn and her husband Peter.
Evelyn apparently had secretly audio taped some of the arguments and fights that they had been having. Everything from any money that she spent, taking the car away from her, shutting off her phone. He wanted to be completely in control of Evelyn, so it was in stark contrast to what Peter described to us. The fact that Peter didn't describe any turmoil caused us to have some doubts about how truthful he was being.
Evelyn's journal contains even more startling revelations about their divorce.
He wanted custody. He was told that he wasn't going to get full custody. And he wanted the sale of the house. So if Evelyn is gone, he's got the child, he's got the sale of the house, and he can move on.
When detectives try to follow up with Peter about these revelations, they're met with silence.
At this point, Peter had retained an attorney, and we were no longer able to question him. So that again raised some suspicion. We went back and looked harder at Peter, based on the fact that he had the most to gain from Evelyn being dead.
With Peter having an ironclad alibi, investigators consider other scenarios.
Maybe he wasn't the one who actually did the murder, but you have to wonder if somehow Peter is involved in this, because it just doesn't make sense that anybody else had a reason to do this.
The suspicion is enough to get a warrant to search Peter's vehicle.
We had no idea at the time that that search of the van was about to unleash a whole new avenue of this investigation and turn this case totally upside down.
New evidence in the Evelyn Visage homicide investigation has led police to revisit her husband, Peter, as a potential suspect. And they are now searching his vehicle for any trace of incriminating evidence.
You just never know what might be that little piece. You know, whether it's a hair or a fingerprint or that one bit of DNA might be the break in the case.
Desperate for any lead in their investigation, police make a critical discovery.
There was an extensive search of Peter's van, and we uncovered in the back pocket of the middle seat of the van $3,700 in cash in a white envelope. In addition to the money that was found, there was a Sprint calling card.
This was tremendous, tremendous evidence that we have just now uncovered. It offered a lot of questions.
Why would a person have $3,700 cash? We examined Peter's financial status. At the time, Peter was not very solvent in terms of having any money. Somebody who's, by all accounts, broke, and he's got $3,700 in the back of his van. And of course, we couldn't ask him why, because he had already retained counsel.
You have to now start wondering, why does this man have $3,700 in $100 bills left behind in his minivan?
It's possible that Peter may have engaged someone to kill Evelyn, and that money was going to be used to pay off the final payment.
Furthest thing from my mind was that a hitman could have been hired. That's really very rare in real life. Let's look at his bank accounts, his credit card statements, you know, things like that, as far as getting any solid evidence he was involved in this.
We went back and looked harder at Peter's bank accounts, stock market, anything like that, in an effort to see if he had taken any money out to try to pay somebody to maybe do this, and nothing was found to be out of the ordinary or even considered to be like a payoff.
Finding no evidence Peter paid to have Evelyn killed, detectives focus on the other item found in his van.
Why would he use a calling card? Most folks, unless you don't have a cell phone or don't have a landline, don't have the necessity for a calling card. And Peter had a cell phone, he had a home phone, so we subpoenaed the records for that calling card.
There were 44 phone calls made from that prepaid phone card records beginning in November of 2002 up until the day of the murder in January of 2003.
Of 44 calls made on that card, almost all of them were made to an individual named Frank Thon.
The name is new to detectives, but when they run it through the police database, they make a telling discovery.
Police learned that Frank Thon was currently, at the time, in jail in the state of New Jersey.
This is a man who's been arrested numerous times, assaults, violent assaults. His most recent arrest was for driving while intoxicated. The officer found a loaded handgun underneath the armrest of the truck and hollow point bullets. At the time of the murder, he was on intensive supervised parole. Shortly after the Visage homicide, Frank Thon turned himself in to serve a year in the county jail.
Could there be an innocent explanation why Peter called a known violent criminal for months leading up to the murder, only to stop the day Evelyn was killed?
We subpoenaed Frank Thon's phone records. Analyzing his phone records, we found that he was in the vicinity of the Visage home on January 6th, the day before the murder, and on January 7th, the day of the murder. Then it became really evident to us that he was involved in this.
So now things are starting to click. We were able to secure a search warrant to search Frank Thon's apartment. And one of the things that the police recovered was a computer. Upon forensic investigation of that computer, we found that Frank Thon had searched directions from his apartment to the Visage home.
The evidence is compelling, but investigators need something more concrete to lay charges.
Based on the evidence that we had, it still was a very weak case. We don't have any forensic evidence that would connect him to the murder of Evelyn Visage.
You need the probable cause, you need the connection to prove your case and to actually have it stick.
With little else to go on, detectives make a bold decision.
We had no other option other than to go at Frank Thon. We knew our case would depend upon Frank Thon making a confession.
This was really the one shot that the police had to solve this case. It was a huge gamble because if he decided to ask for a lawyer, they could not question him anymore. If he denied it, they were stuck with what he had to say.
Police can only hope that Frank reveals the truth of whether Peter was involved in the murder.
We don't have a case against Peter. We're getting closer to figuring out maybe what occurred, but again, it doesn't prove that Peter Visage had any relationship to this murder.
We had nothing other than just the fact that Peter is calling Frank Thon. This case is going to rise and fall, whether we succeed or not with an interview.
Investigators head to the county jail to confront the hardened criminal.
I specifically requested a small room where we could have the table against the wall, and we deliberately set that room up to increase Frank Thon's anxiety. We had lawyer boxes with Evelyn Visage's name on the boxes. We had maps with pins in them. The small office was full of, as I call it, a number of props.
With everything in place, police bring in 41-year-old Frank Thon.
They took the handcuffs off him, and we pretty much just stared at him for like a good minute or two, again, in an attempt to increase his anxiety. And he was visibly nervous. And I said to him, I said, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I already know what happened, and I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to tell you what, a murder for hire in New York, you could potentially face the death penalty. We told him that we had all types of evidence implicating him, and his face hit the table. He's perspiring heavily. His heart rate was obviously increased. I could see the vein in his neck beating. And I said to him, I said, you don't have any friends in this world right now. I said, if you tell us the truth, we'll try to assist you in getting the best possible deal. There was a long pause. He took a big sigh, and then he began to tell us what happened.
"4 weeks after the murder of Evelyn Visage, investigators have just convinced suspected hitman Frank Thon to start talking.
He almost had a look of detachment from what was going on. He took a big sigh and he says, all right, I'll tell you guys what happened. Frank Thon told us that he was the person who killed Evelyn.
Frank Thon confessed not only to the murder of Evelyn Visage, but that he was hired by her husband, Peter.
I really was surprised after everything was said and done, after all of the investigative leads, that it all came back to Peter.
Frank tells detectives that he was introduced to Peter 3 months ago through a mutual acquaintance.
Peter asked this gentleman if he knew of anybody that could take care of his wife. Frank Thon requested $10,000 cash, with $5,000 being paid up front. We later learned that Peter obtained money from a friend of a friend on a loan. A short time after that, Peter Visich met Frank Thon at a pizzeria where Peter gave Frank the down payment of $5,000 cash. I looked at the money found in the van as this could have been the final payment.
To hear that for such a small amount of money that somebody was willing to go out there and kill someone, I was shocked and disgusted.
In his confession, Frank describes Peter's impatience to have Evelyn killed.
He told me that he had a second envelope ready. He was really pushing it.
Peter Visich was pestering him to get this done, so he decided January 7th was going to be the night.
Frank meets Peter at the Visich home the day before the murder.
He told me to lay out of the house and I'd be able to walk to the back of the house and he would leave a door unlocked for me.
Peter told Frank that he would leave the back door open, and he gave Evelyn's schedule for that day.
The next day, Peter establishes his alibi.
He went to his mother's house and then the shopping mall and then stopping to get milk. He knows that there's video cameras, he knows that he's going to get a receipt. That's all adding time to his alibi that can also be substantiated.
After sunset, Frank enters the Visich house and removes the light bulbs to lie in wait for Evelyn in the dark.
Garage door open, then I heard the house door open. Then I heard her coming up the stairs, and that's when I came out of the room.
He had a gun. He pushed her into the bedroom, had her kneel on the bed, and he told her he was merely here to do a robbery and he wasn't going to hurt her. He said he then took a knife that he had brought with him and stabbed her twice in the back.
She dropped to her knees from the bed. She slid down.
Yeah, what do you do?
I took her by the forehead from behind her.
Yeah.
I sliced in, then I sliced back. I heard the blade. Scratched the bone. I recognized the sound. She dropped immediately to my right on the floor. I heard the air leaving her body. I stabbed her 2 or 3 more times in the chest.
Do you leave the knife behind?
Yes, I did.
Where'd you leave it?
Stuck in the chest.
Frank Thon was the instrument of Evelyn's death. But Peter Visich brought that instrument into his own home.
On Valentine's Day, 2003, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Peter Visich.
Police rushed to take Peter into custody.
They said, "Peter, I have very good news for you." He said, "What's that?" He was somewhat befuddled. I said, "We found out who killed your wife." And he became like almost giggly. He's like, "Really, who?" I said, "You did, expletive. You're under arrest."
It angers me and it pains me to think that the person that she married was the one that did that to her. It's shocking. It's sad.
I was very surprised. Like, I was shocked. All of us were.
He went through this elaborate murder, and I just thought, like, how pathetic are you as a person?
Frank Thon pleads guilty for his role in the murder of Evelyn.
In exchange for his cooperation, he was promised a sentence of 20 years to life if he testified truthfully at the trial of Peter Visich.
In November of 2003, in front of a packed courtroom, Peter stands trial for plotting to murder Evelyn.
Evelyn's friends and family were throughout the trial present. They had to endure really gut-wrenching testimony, particularly when Frank Thon testified.
He said that he told her at the end, I'm gonna put you out of your misery. And your husband was the one that hired me. She was just in shock.
Peter Visage never takes the stand during the 8-day trial.
He showed no emotion the whole entire trial.
I would look at him and then just think to myself, like, why you had to get to that point? Why did you do it?
After hearing the evidence, the jury deliberates for only 3 hours.
The jurors announced that they did have a unanimous verdict, guilty on each and every count, including murder in the first degree, which carried a life without parole sentence.
We all screamed. We were relieved, and we felt like justice had been served, although it was bittersweet.
It's just so hard to comprehend why. Now the child doesn't have a mom or dad.
What he did to Ryan is just as unforgivable as what he did to Evelyn, because he deprived Ryan of one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met in my life. I've never met anyone like Evelyn.
For those closest to Evelyn, she remains alive in their hearts.
Evelyn is still here with us. She's still in our spirit. She was full of love. She was full of life. She was the life of the party.
She was always happy. And if you weren't happy next to her, she would have made you happy. She was a good soul. She was a good person. She will always be missed.
He was a popular high school teen with a big heart.
He was loved by everybody. He was there for anybody, anytime.
He was a really likable and caring person.
Until his life was violently stolen while he slept.
It was unbelievable because I was trying to figure out what was going on.
We pretty much are starting with a blank slate.
It was really a whodunit. Don't have a lot of answers.
Detectives unearth a world of deceit and intimidation.
She said if he would have just kept his mouth shut, this never would have happened.
There were two teenagers bragging about being connected with a homicide.
He was already in custody, so was this something that he had orchestrated?
To reveal a sinister plot.
A fisherman contacted the police department and said, hey, I found this gun.
So that was a twist where you never would have expected that.
The whole scenario was crazy.
And discover a mastermind no one expected.
We were dumbfounded, like, what just happened here?
I don't think anybody thought that this is how it would end.
I felt totally betrayed. I wasn't just shocked. I was floored.
Set against the picturesque backdrop of the Oregon mountains, the small town of Eugene is 100 miles south of Portland.
The community is nice. It's a good place to raise a family. It's a college community. The University of Oregon is there. It's a beautiful area of the Pacific Northwest.
Eugene's a small town, relatively. We're like the second or third largest city in Oregon, but that's still about 200,000 people. It's a quiet place.
In the early morning hours on Monday, October 3rd, 1994, the serenity of this close-knit community is shattered.
A 911 call was made. It was a mother who was in anguish. Her teenage son had been seriously injured, bleeding from his head.
Emergency units raced to the home, arriving in a matter of minutes.
When the first responders arrived, they were able to quickly assess that it was a gunshot wound to the head. And although he was unconscious, he was still alive.
As paramedics battle to save the teen, police arrive to investigate the shooting. Janice Itura identifies the victim as her 18-year-old son, Aaron Itura.
Aaron Itura was almost immediately transported to the hospital.
As detectives get to work, they need to determine who would shoot a teenage boy and why.
In short order, we're preserving the scene, beginning to document it with photographs, and start gathering information. His bedroom had been partitioned off inside the attached garage of the residence. He had furnished it or decorated it as, typical teen male would. He had been in bed asleep with a girl that he was dating at the time. We knew he had sustained a devastating gunshot wound to the head.
The girlfriend who was lying beside him was unharmed. Police asked her to wait with the family while they continue to investigate the crime scene.
And a fragment of the bullet was found at the scene. It seemed like the caliber of the gun was a .38 caliber.
The weapon is nowhere to be found, and there's no sign of forced entry to the home.
Somebody had just opened the garage door. It wasn't locked.
There's nothing of value missing. Detectives wonder if the attacker could have a personal motive.
If somebody had a gun and they went in there to steal property, but the people woke up and discovered them, you would expect both people to be shot. The fact that one person wasn't shot and the other one was would indicate that there's a motive to single that person out.
With the crime scene yielding little information, detectives question those closest to Aaron, his family and girlfriend, who were at the scene of the crime.
I mean, it was a really whodunit out of the blue. Don't have a lot of answers.
The police department were still trying to figure out what happened and who was involved.
The detective questions how Janice came to find Aaron.
Aaron had gone to his room, and his girlfriend, Carrie, was spending the night. And then all of a sudden, about 1:30 in the morning, I hear screaming. I went out to the bedroom, and here's Aaron on the bed, and his girlfriend, Carrie's just freaked out. And I looked at Aaron, and he had a big old gash on his head. Then I saw blood. And I called 911, and then I just grabbed him and held him for a while. I was trying to figure out what happened.
Aaron Iturra was born on December 28, 1975. He was the oldest of 5 children, raised by single mom Janice.
Aaron was a good kid. He was there for anybody, anytime. And he had a lot of responsibilities as far as helping out, because I worked sometimes 2 jobs, and he took care of all of his young siblings.
Growing up, Aaron was always tall for his age and came to be known as a gentle giant.
People described him a big, lovable teddy bear. He was a really likable and caring person with a mom who was really involved in his life.
In his last year of high school, Aaron was popular, well-respected, and easygoing.
Well, he liked to draw. He wanted to go to art school in New York, and that was his goal.
Recently, Aaron had found love with a local girl named Carrie.
She worked at the little neighborhood store, and they had been dating about 4 or 5 months.
Aaron took pride in his community and was highly active in the area's anti-gang movement.
He had the courage to step up and do what was right. He was just the type of guy that people came to with their problems. He was the protector. He watched out for everybody.
Aaron was looking ahead to a bright future. No one can think of anyone who'd want to shoot this young man point blank in his own bed. Investigators turned to Aaron's girlfriend, Carrie, who was lying next to him during the attack. Carrie tells detectives she awoke to the sound of the gunshot, but couldn't see much in the dark.
Carrie, the girlfriend, certainly needs to be looked at as a potential suspect because of her proximity at the time the shooting occurs.
The police decided to take her down to the police station and to talk to her in a lot more detail about what she knew.
While police transfer Carrie to the station, detectives focus on Aaron's family.
In the early stages, it's really important to exclude witnesses from being possible suspects. Part of the procedure of the police was to take gunshot residue swabs from the people in the house.
I needed to get to the hospital. I needed to see how he was, but we couldn't leave. We had to wait till we were cleared through the gunpowder residue testing.
Aaron's mom and siblings test negative for gunshot residue. They immediately race to the hospital.
Janice was almost immediately notified by a doctor that her son's brain scans showed that there was no brain activity.
The nurse was trying to tell me that he's not going to make it.
Later that morning, the decision is made to take Aaron off life support.
I think he just was done fighting. I lost a big chunk of my heart. I just couldn't believe that I'll never see him again.
As Aaron's family grieve their devastating loss, at the station, detectives interview Aaron's girlfriend, Carrie. They ask her if she knows of anyone who would want to harm Aaron.
She claimed she didn't know why this occurred and who would have a motive to have killed him.
When detectives question Carrie about trouble in their relationship, she denies any problems.
Maybe she just wasn't being straight or truthful. Right off, you can't rule out the possibility that someone like Carrie may have shot Aaron for some personal motive.
Forensics check Carrie's hands and clothing to determine if she fired the weapon that killed Aaron.
Gunshot residue wasn't there. Swabs confirmed that she was not involved in a shooting.
With Carrie ruled out as the shooter, police ask her if anything unusual happened that night. She tells police about a mysterious phone call Aaron received just hours before the crime.
Carrie had mentioned a call had been made to the house. It was some girl, just wanting to know if Aaron was there. And then the caller hung up.
Investigators have Carrie walk them through the moments before Aaron was shot.
She said she was laying next to him. They were both fast asleep when she was awakened by some noise, which, as it turns out, was a gunshot.
Then, Carrie reveals a crucial detail.
Carrie becomes a key part of the investigation. She mentioned that she had seen who did it.
Coming up, the investigation takes a stunning turn.
What we learned indicated that they knew a lot more about what happened than what they'd said originally.
And unravels a tale of betrayal.
And I'm just like, did I just hear her say what I think I heard her say?
There was almost something pathological about their relationship.
To reveal a ruthless killer hiding in plain sight.
They were absolutely a master manipulator.
It was what they call a Jekyll and Hyde.
It was really shocking how the case turned.
Police are investigating the murder of 18-year-old Aaron Itura, gunned down in his sleep. Aaron's girlfriend, Carrie, is the sole eyewitness to the crime, and police are hoping she can provide them with a lead.
The police department are still trying to figure out what is the reason why he would be singled out and killed.
Detectives continue to question Carrie about the details surrounding the murder.
Carrie provided information to the police that it was two killers. She believed they had their faces covered with bandanas and their hands covered, so she could not get a good description of them. She was able to identify them as young males, but not much beyond that.
But who could the two masked assailants be? Police ask Carrie if she can think of anyone in her recent past who would want to harm Aaron.
She might have had a jealous ex-boyfriend, might have had a grudge against Aaron that she would have been aware of. And so we were exploring all of those avenues to find any potential connections.
After interviewing Carrie, police dig into her background and find no serious ex-boyfriend or anyone else that could link to the crime. With no significant leads, investigators turn to the community for help.
We pretty much are starting with a blank slate. The police had kind of fanned out, into the community and were asking people whether they knew anything about what had happened to Aaron Itura.
But no one heard or saw anything suspicious. For this laid-back community, news of Aaron's brutal murder is a shock.
All we knew was this young man had been sleeping in his bed and somebody had gotten in there and shot and killed him. We were dumbfounded, like, what just happened here? This is Eugene, Oregon. You don't have young people being killed right in their home, in their bedroom while they're sleeping. And people were scared.
Detectives begin to look at Aaron's work with the anti-gang group. Had he made some dangerous enemies?
Law enforcement was certainly concerned about gang activity. There was a sense, anyway, that Aaron, he's been at these anti-gang task force meetings, and now this kid has been shot in the head. So it certainly raises questions.
Police learned that Aaron had been working closely with local anti-gang activist Mary Thompson.
A lot of people knew who Mary Thompson was. She was wanting to sound the alarm about gangs in Eugene. And she established herself as kind of the citizen voice among law enforcement and other agencies dealing with that. She was a working mom with a teen, her son, Bo, who was getting in and out of trouble.
Mary Thompson was involved in publicizing the threat of gangs. How that developed for her was that her son, Bo, who was 16 and had gotten involved in some gang activity and serious crimes.
She said he's a member of a local Crip gang, and if it can happen in my family, it can happen in any families. And oftentimes, she was going to various schools and in the media for an anti-gang sentiment.
Mary's home was open to troubled teens trying to avoid gang life, but she needed help with her expanding network.
Aaron got approached in school about assisting with the community outreach. He took that role seriously.
Aaron was very proud. Sometimes I could hear him talking to his sisters about, you know, I've got to do this. I'm going to help some kid someday, and Mary's on the right track. I thought she was amazing. Here's a woman that's 40-some years old, and she is out with Aaron, making people aware, because most people in this town had no idea that this was going on.
The day after the murder, investigators pay Mary a visit, looking for a lead.
She was shocked that Aaron Iturra had been shot and killed, and more than willing to try to help in any way that she could. She offered a whole list of names of people that she knew were associated with him.
Then, Mary shares a disturbing detail.
When the police went to talk to Mary Thompson, she told them about a gang member from Portland that was a Crip that had stopped by her house looking for Aaron Iturra before the homicide. And she identified him by the name of Sonny and said what kind of car he was driving. And this gang was dangerous.
He wasn't somebody that she previously knew, just that he had showed up and was inquiring about Aaron. Where does he live and what can you tell me about him, sort of thing. Her information was that people in the gang life up in Portland were upset because of Aaron's cooperation in anti-gang efforts. Given the proximity of when this had occurred to Aaron's death, you couldn't ignore that this might all be coming out of people in Portland. She provided a general description of Sonny and of a car that he was driving. He wasn't on our radar. So the information about Sonny was documented and passed on and shared with the Portland Gang Bureau.
While Portland's gang unit tracked down Sonny, Eugene police talked with Aaron's friends. Had Aaron been concerned for his own safety before the murder?
They said before the homicide, Aaron Iturra told them a story about a gang member wanting to do harm to him. But there's not a lot of information.
This could be significant. This might, in fact, be gang-related. So we were looking for the active gang member of Sonny.
Less than 36 hours after Aaron Iturra is found shot in his bed, investigators believe the cold-blooded murder of the teen could be tied to his work in an anti-gang group. According to Aaron's mentor, Mary Thompson, a gang member named Sonny had been looking for him.
The result of the inquiry with Portland has come back and they came up blank. They had no information about any Sonny. The car description didn't match anything in their files. So it was a big zero. You know, they were saying we don't have anything. So as a result of that, we were frustrated that we didn't have a suspect.
Then, detectives received the autopsy results.
Aaron sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the head, and it was a single shot.
It was an aimed shot with a .38 caliber to the back of the head that would go through the brain. have almost 100% chance of causing the death of the person that was hit.
48 hours into the case, with few clues to investigate, the pressure on police increases.
There's a sense of uncertainty and unease, that can permeate the community if you don't solve this crime, if it remains unsolved.
When you're in a small community, you want some answers because somebody out there in the town we live in snuck into the bedroom of this young man and killed him. That's scarier than anything when you don't know any other details.
The lack of progress also takes a toll on Aaron's family.
There was times that I would have been willing to follow Aaron, but I put my grief on the back burner. Continue taking care of my kids because it's not their fault. But it was so hard with just certain songs, certain times. I just would kind of collapse. It's just kind of what you do.
Fortunately, Janice isn't without support. Friends like Aaron's mentor, Mary, help the family get through tough times.
Mary Thompson was very sorry. She couldn't understand who would ever do that. We both were grieving. So I got some really nice words from her. I'm in the mindset of, well, we're going to catch who did this, who shot him. And she's like agreeing with me, yeah, we need to find out who did this.
At the station, police search for new leads and find a report about a recent incident involving Aaron and are surprised when they come across a familiar name.
Mary Thompson's son, whose name was Beau Flynn, was connected to this case. He was 16 years old. Beau had been involved in the juvenile system before for his violence and criminal activity. He was empowered and emboldened by dangerous crime.
We learned Mary asked Aaron to keep an eye out for Beau and try to steer him clear of trouble. The plan was just simply for Aaron to spend time with Beau, be a positive influence.
But instead of Beau moving away from trouble, he drags Aaron into it. 3 weeks before the murder, they have a dangerous encounter.
Beau and Aaron were in West Eugene and encountered some other youths. And one of them had some prior issue with Beau. Beau suspected that this kid had snitched him off, or they got into an argument or whatever it might be. The confrontation escalated. Beau, who was carrying a knife, produced the knife and ended up cutting the other kid. Patrol officers arrived and they both were arrested.
Aaron went to the Lane County Jail. I had to go down and get him. And I was so mad at him that I said, you're responsible for your actions. But he did know right from wrong. And he was not afraid to stand up for what was right.
Then, Aaron makes a risky decision to testify against Beau. Aaron was killed on October 3rd, just 2 days before he was due to give his witness statement. Was this the reason for Aaron's murder?
We consider the possibility that Beau was involved in the killing, especially as this potential motive emerged that Aaron was a witness in a pending case against Beau that would result in him being incarcerated potentially 3 or 4 years.
Investigators pay a visit to Beau, who's in custody at the state's juvenile facility for the knife assault.
He was already in custody at the time that the homicide occurred, so was this something that Beau had orchestrated?
When detectives interview Beau Flynn and ask him what happened, Beau Flynn says, I didn't do anything, I don't know anything about it.
At the time, there wasn't any credible information that developed that suggested that he had orchestrated this crime.
The police don't have any evidence that gives Beau's role in the commission of this murder.
Having lost Beau as a viable suspect, detectives are at risk of hitting a standstill in the case. But then, Aaron's mom contacts police with a disturbing new lead.
I told him that somebody heard a couple of other people at the high school were talking about how they were going to take care of the big guy, and we all knew the big guy was Aaron because he was the biggest kid at Willamette High School.
We also were hearing rumors that there were two young gang members involved in the community bragging about being connected with a homicide.
Police dig deeper into these rumors, turning to Aaron's friends for more details.
When we're talking to kids that were associated with Aaron, we're just trying to find out, what do you know and who could have done this? Jim Elstad and Joe Brown had been identified as part of this loose-knit group of kids that were often frequenting the Thompson residence. And they were kind of on the fringe. The information persisted that both admitted and talked about the murder itself. They were saying that they had done the killing. They were proud of what they'd done. These kids needed to be contacted. Even as we were working it was really shocking how the case turned.
Police investigating the execution-style shooting of 18-year-old Aaron Itura have a new lead. Two local teens have been bragging about the killing.
What the word was on the street was Joseph Brown and James Elstad were the two individuals involved in the killing of Aaron Itura.
I knew they were friends of Bo's, but these kids were Aaron's friends as well. Jim Elstad grew up with my kids. His little brother was my daughter's best friend. And hearing that he would even be involved was just bizarre, but that's what they were saying.
We were told from the circle of kids that were being identified and contacted, said that Jim Elstad and Aaron Itura had been friends at one time, and that most recently, leading up to the homicide, that relationship had soured. So, a source of friction that should be explored and investigated.
Joe Brown and Jim Elstad, they didn't appear to have criminal records, so there wasn't a whole lot to go on.
Before police can speak to the two teens, they get a surprise visit from Mary Thompson.
She indicated that she also heard that Joseph Brown and Jim Elstad might have been involved in the homicide.
But what Mary reveals next stuns the detective.
The homicide happened on October 3rd in the early morning hours, and she tells the police that both Elstad and Brown ended up coming to her house after the homicide and telling her that they had killed Itura.
Acknowledged that she hadn't been entirely candid with us from the beginning. Her explanation for that was, well, I just didn't believe him. I just couldn't imagine them doing it. I wasn't seeing anything in their demeanor that suggests that they had done this homicide, and so I didn't volunteer that information up front because I didn't think it was credible at the time.
But now Mary believes the two teens could have been telling the truth. Armed with this new information, police bring Jim Elstad and Joe Brown to the station for questioning.
When they were interviewed, both of them denied any knowledge of the homicide. Elstad and Brown had agreed to take polygraphs as a way to clear themselves of suspicion. And so they were each polygraphed that same day, and both flunked.
Detectives grill the teens for hours, and eventually they break down and confess.
Brown and Elstad finally acknowledged that they had been involved and had done the homicide.
To understand how Aaron Itura was killed that night, police have Joseph Brown recreate the murder at the crime scene.
He had agreed to come back and do what we call a walkthrough, where you're basically doing a videotape statement and you're describing, and in some instances you might even enact, what occurred.
Joe tells police he was the lookout, and Jim Elstad was the one who shot Aaron. But what was their motive?
Gradually, what emerged was they were upset because their homie Bo, was at risk of being incarcerated further because Aaron was cooperating with the police and was willing to testify against him in this knife incident.
In their statements, Joseph Brown and James Elstad took personal responsibility for the homicide. They did not say that their activities were at the direction of Bo.
Detectives need something concrete to corroborate their story, so they ask about the murder weapon. When police ask Joe Brown what happened to the gun, he tells them it's in the river.
After the homicide, Joseph Brown throws the gun into the river to dispose of it.
Police search the river for the gun, but can't find it.
The fact emerged, that we were looking for the weapon. A fisherman contacted the police department and said, hey, I don't know if it's connected or not, but I was fishing that stretch of the river, and I found this gun. So a patrol officer is sent out and takes possession of the gun from him and books it into evidence. They then do a ballistic check on the gun, and they find out it was consistent with the murder weapon.
You have their confession, and you've got the murder weapon, so you can corroborate their confession to the point where the conviction of those two people is solid.
On October 6, 1994, Jim Elstad and Joe Brown are arrested for the murder of 18-year-old Aaron Itura.
It was very hard to find out. Jim Elstad shot Aaron while he was sleeping. It was like just unbelievable.
After the arrests, Aaron's mentor, Mary Thompson, reaches out to Janice.
Mary called me. First it was like, well, we need to get together, maybe have a coffee, and I'll buy you lunch. And then she said, if Aaron would have just kept his mouth shut, this never would have happened. And I'm just like, did I just hear her say what I think I heard her say? At that point, I got real concerned. So I called Detective Rainey and told him what happened.
What we learned indicated that Mary knew a lot more about what happened than she had said originally.
For police, Mary's alarming statement is one of many things they are now questioning.
Initially, it was thought to just be this homicide that had been committed by these two guys, but there was just this overriding perception that she was more involved than she had admitted.
Less than a week after 18-year-old Aaron Itura was shot to death in his bed, former friends Jim Elstad and Joe Brown are charged with his murder. But now, the actions of Aaron's anti-gang mentor, Mary Thompson, have detectives thinking the case is far from over.
Mary Thompson's behavior had been raising some red flags.
She failed to mention that Brown and Elstad came to her house that night. It was just a convenient fact that she forgot to mention. And she also had made a call to Janice. That was actually unusual, suspicious in nature.
At that point, the police decided to take her down to the police station and to talk to her in more detail.
Investigators want to know why Mary withheld information surrounding Aaron's murder.
In that interview, she talks about being extremely angry with Aaron Itura after he informed on her son about the knife fight. But she didn't want him to be killed.
Do we know for sure that she's implicated in the murder? No. Can we prove it at that time? No.
Since police lack solid evidence that Mary is involved, they let her go. With the killers behind bars, Aaron's loved ones gathered to say their final farewells.
It was one beautiful, beautiful day. High school kids, teachers, counselors, they all showed up. Mary was there as well. And there was probably 2,000 people. People I didn't even know were there. Aaron was loved by everybody.
5 days after the arrest of Aaron's murderers, police are still troubled by Mary Thompson's unusual behavior, so they dig deeper into her past.
10 or 15 years prior, there was some other events in Josephine County, which is a county in southern Oregon. She had identified herself as being a person that was working as an assistant to prosecuting the drug trade. And it turned out that she was a methamphetamine manufacturer at that time, and that she got caught selling methamphetamine. Looking at Mary Thompson's past, she was engaged in criminal activity. It was definitely shocking. She was a crime fighter that the community trusted, that had engaged in that kind of behavior. So that was a twist where you never would have expected that.
Mary's history proves she's capable of lying and manipulating to get what she wants. Now investigators wonder what she's capable of in connection to this case.
As we knew and learned more about her, it was pretty eye-opening, shocking even to investigators. Part of the picture that emerged about Mary was her relationship with her son, Bo, and how protective she had been of him.
She'd had a bunch of relationships in her life that had not turned out, and the only one that stayed with her was Bo Flynn, her son. And so she was willing to do things that were antisocial and illegal in order to maintain Bo's relationship with her. She viewed herself as being a peer. Instead of directing her son to be a law-abiding citizen, she chose to get in the criminal gutter with him.
There was almost, I'm no expert, but almost something pathological about their relationship in terms of what a parent will do to protect their child.
She knew that Aaron was the only thing standing between her and her son's charges.
After Bo, the only person that had motive to eliminate Itura as a witness was Mary Thompson.
Detectives start questioning the teens Mary claims she's been keeping out of gangs.
When we're talking to kids that were identified as having frequented the Thompson residence, they weren't involved in school, they didn't have healthy relationships, they were all kind of lacking something in their life and felt that. It seemed that she already had developed a family structure that she was able to manipulate for her own purposes, and she had somehow orchestrated the murder of Aaron Itura, and as a result of that, she began emerging more and more as this prime suspect.
But could Mary go so far as to have Aaron killed?
To advance this investigation, the idea came up about doing a wiretap to see if something was being said here that could be used to either eliminate Mary from suspicion or would lead to evidence to convict her of murder.
On the wiretap, detectives hear Mary's son, Bo, who's on parole, discussing gang activities with other gang members.
They called themselves the 74 Hoover Crips.
They were involved in selling drugs and stealing property. We were thinking it was possible Bo was in charge of the gang.
Just when investigators think Bo is the gang leader, someone else comes on the line.
It became quickly apparent that Mary was calling the shots. She was pressuring people to do stuff.
Mary Thompson's role in the gang is definitely as a leader.
They heard Mary planning robberies, beatings, car thefts, just a hive of criminal activity.
Mary Thompson, in her exchanges, in these intercepted phone calls, clearly is talking the talk. I mean, she knows the lingo, the street language, and she's a very legitimate threat. She tells them she's got connections outside of Eugene even that, if need be, she can marshal to come in and start dealing with people.
But nothing links Mary directly to Aaron's murder until she makes a telling statement.
There's a conversation that she has with a gang member, and she says, "Don't worry, I haven't screamed at you, have I? Aaron Itura got screamed at before he got whacked. He knew how I felt." So she essentially admits to the gang killing Itura.
We ripped off the veneer of her being this concerned mom who only immersed herself in this culture out of concern for her son. Facts that were developing were pretty revealing.
Though the admission is damning, detectives know they'll need more to secure a conviction.
We felt that we needed a direct witness who would tell us about all these conversations that happened up and including the homicide of Aaron Itura. Our tactic was to break the gang, essentially, and to see what we could do about getting them to testify against Mary Thompson.
In the cold-blooded killing of Aaron Itura, police have arrested 2 young gang members. Now, wiretaps have revealed Aaron's anti-gang mentor, Mary Thompson, is actually a ruthless gang leader.
Mary Thompson became a prime suspect in the case, and the wiretaps were really instrumental in revealing the extent of the influence that Mary had.
Investigators are now convinced Mary is behind the 18-year-old's murder. But to charge her, they need additional evidence.
We arrested the gang for all of these crimes that they committed that we knew about during the wire, whether it was committing a burglary or stealing weapons.
Investigators then questioned the teen gang members, hoping to get them to flip on Mary. The prosecutor thinks their best shot lies with one of the youngest members of the gang, named Lisa.
We decided that we were going to give Lisa immunity on the condition that she testified about the gang and about the homicide of Aaron Itura.
Lisa agrees to tell investigators everything she knows.
It became pretty clear not only was Mary the leader of the gang, but when it came to eliminating Itura, the behavior of Elstad and Brown was guided by her.
Mary was always saying that something's got to be done about Aaron. We can't let him testify against Bo, and that shifted to actually killing him.
From Lisa's account of Aaron's murder, the missing pieces fall into place.
The Friday before the homicide, there's a big meeting of the gang at Mary Thompson's house. Mary encouraged Jim Elstad to commit the homicide. On the night of the murder, Lisa's role is that she is the one that calls Itura's residence. And when Itura answers the phone, she hangs up on him. And that information gets communicated back to Jim Elstad and Joseph Brown that Itura is at his house and they should go forward and commit the crime.
Mary tells Brown and Elstad to wait until everyone in the Itura home is asleep.
1:30 in the morning, when Aaron was in bed with our girlfriend, Carrie, they were both fast asleep. Brown and Elstad had snuck into the room, and Joe Brown was the lookout. And then Jim Elstad hadn't hesitated and fired once into Aaron's head. Carrie then was awakened by that noise. By then, Elstad and Brown had fled the garage. They go to Mary Thompson's house after having committed the homicide, and then Joe Brown gets taken to the river, and Mary Thompson takes him there to dispose of the gun. And this is kind of significant. That was even done at her suggestion.
At the outset of the investigation, Mary Thompson went to police with information on Brown and Elstad in an attempt to throw police off her trail.
Throughout all this, of course, Mary's trying to keep her fingerprints off of everything, so she's evading responsibility. But her influence, it resulted in Aaron Itura's death.
Mary Thompson was absolutely a master manipulator. That was demonstrated many, many times.
In February 1995, Mary is charged with aggravated homicide for her role in killing Aaron Itura.
I was floored. I just had no idea that Mary could have been involved at that extent. It was just what they call Jekyll and Hyde, you know. I felt totally betrayed by another mom.
I don't think anybody suspected when she was teaching us about gangs that she actually was planning the whole thing.
Everybody was trying to do the right thing by her and her crusades and her telling me how amazing my son was and the idea that he would go out and help her and then find out that she would have murdered my son herself.
In December 1994, Joe Brown and Jim Elstad received 10 and 16 years respectively after pleading guilty to the murder of Aaron Itura. Almost 2 years later, on June 4th, 1996, Mary Thompson goes to trial and pleads not guilty. Gang members testify in court, supporting the prosecution's case.
They all eventually, came on board and were effective witnesses.
After a 6-week trial, on July 23rd, 1996, the jury finds 41-year-old Mary Thompson guilty for her role in the murder of Aaron Itura.
It's been such an emotional trauma on us all. It's like, it's not only me that she's hurt, it's not only my son that she's destroyed, it's my family, his friends, the kids involved, everybody.
She's probably been doing this her whole life, but she didn't win.
Mary Thompson is sentenced to life in prison for aggravated murder, among other charges, including hindering the prosecution.
When you think of the level of deception that she perpetrated and then ultimately to see her held responsible for that, that's a real satisfying feeling as an investigator. The whole case from beginning to end was unsettling. I don't think anybody would have gone into it thought that this is how it would end.
Aaron's loved ones find relief in the closing of that dark chapter in their lives. They try their best to move forward, but thoughts of the good-natured 18-year-old are never far away.
I talk to him daily, but my family was a whole unit. You know, you got one spoke missing. He was the protector. I always feel he's here. You know, he's around us. You know, he still had the courage to do the right thing. And he did the right thing in the end, even though it cost him his life.
A wealthy commodities trader with the world at his feet.
My brother was a fun-loving guy.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money, the Cadillacs and the Rolex watches.
Is viciously gunned down.
And they shot him again and again and again.
With his wife and kids in the home at the time of the attack.
It was a very traumatic event to the family, with people with guns threatening them.
You can't dismiss the fact that it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up. I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Police chased down a number of suspects.
There was a complete falling out between them. Someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
A sudden disappearance leaves everyone on edge.
There was a trader. He disappeared off the face of the earth. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
One dead and one missing. Put a different spin on this type of investigation.
Every lead brings investigators to a dead end.
It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Until 30 years later.
They were holding a very big secret inside.
When the shocking truth is revealed.
Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. That's not even human. That's the devil.
Just 30 minutes outside of Chicago lies Inverness, Illinois.
Inverness is one of the wealthiest suburbs of Chicago. It's a safe, beautiful neighborhood.
Some would call it very rich, very large homes, and very few crimes are ever committed in that area.
But on April 30th, 1979, at 3:20 p.m., police receive a distressing call from a 15-year-old girl named Becky Gamari.
Her words were, "There's been a robbery. My dad's been shot." She was bleeding from the chest. The police responded immediately.
As we entered through the front door, we were met by Becky Gamari. She was crying and pointing downstairs. I went downstairs and I saw a male who was leaning back in the sofa who appeared to have numerous gunshot wounds. There was a woman who was kneeling at the feet of the victim, crying almost in hysterics.
The woman identifies herself as Jackie Gamari. She says the victim is her husband, Carl, and that she and her 3 youngest children, Bobby, Carly, and Nick, were in the home when the intruders stormed in.
Those children must have been terrified and felt so helpless. It's horrifying.
The families were taken out to the squad car so that they were secure and away from everyone.
Investigators set to work processing the crime scene, starting with the body.
I went over to the victim. I didn't find a pulse. There was a number of bullet holes in his chest with the blood basically draining down to his pants. I noticed a 9mm gun, and there were a number of 9mm casings that were strewn about the victim's feet. There was also a small .380 caliber handgun. It appeared that a 9mm was placed to make some type of a statement. This could be a staged killing
The victim, his legs were crossed at his ankles. It didn't appear to be a natural position. I went and took an inventory of what the rest of the house looked like. The bedrooms, the dresser drawers had been opened. A number of items appeared to be tossed on the floor. I could see that there were jewelry boxes that still had jewelry in them, which raises questions as to why they actually came to that residence.
Was this a legitimate robbery? Was this staged to cover something up? You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up. It did bring into question that they were there really to kill the victim.
We took a number of fingerprint lifts from the kitchen, the dining room, and the bedroom area.
One of the officers noticed them. There was no forced entry. Nobody kicked in the door or pried it.
As police continue working the scene, Carl's family receives the tragic news.
My sister called me and says, "You better get home, Carl was shot." It's the whole neighborhood where the house was all cordoned off. We were told by the police he's in the house, he's dead, and they're investigating. So we were all like stunned.
When this happened, it was just a huge, huge shock, and we didn't know how to react. Disbelief and just can't be.
Carl Gamari was born in Elmwood Park, Illinois in 1944. He was the third of 4 children.
My brother Carl was a fun-loving guy. You know, he liked to go out and have fun, you know, go on dates with girls and go to parties and things like that.
When Carl was in high school, he met the love of his life.
When he started dating Jackie, he was like 18, and I think she was 17 at the time. He just knew that this was the one, and, you know, he wanted to get married, and he wanted to get married now.
Still teenagers, Carl and Jackie started a family right away.
Carl was excited to be a dad. They had 4 kids. Becky was the oldest, Bobby was the second oldest, Carly was the third daughter, and then Nick was the youngest. He was his son.
By 1977, Carl had the perfect family and the perfect job, working in finance at the Chicago Board of Trade.
Carl climbed up the ladder. He was energetic, and he loved it, and it fit his personality to a T.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money. He came to Cadillacs, Rolex watches, and things like that. He started living a high life.
From the outside, Carl's life seemed picture perfect. But now, his violent death leaves his family shattered.
He's been shot, and I was shocked. You know, no one knew anything, what's going on. I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Investigators start by interviewing Carl's family, who were also witnesses to the crime.
I took Jackie and the 2 girls out to the garage so I could get a general statement from them as to what occurred.
Jackie was crying and very upset. Becky was crying. Bobby was crying. This was the most traumatic thing children could go through. They said Carl went to work. Jackie was at home with Bobby, her 13-year-old daughter, 5-year-old Carly, and 2-year-old Nick. Around 12 or 12:30, Bobby is laying on the couch, and she's watching TV, and 2 men come in, and they have guns.
She said the 2 men were wearing stocking masks and dark clothing, and they had come in through the unlocked back door.
They point the guns at her, and they ask her, "Where's your mother?" So Bobby leads these men to the master bedroom, where Jackie is on the phone. They ask Jackie for her money, and she says, "I only have $20. And they said, "We're here for more than that." These men tie Bobby's hands behind her back, and then they tie up Jackie. They force them into the master bedroom closet with Carly, with baby Nick. Time is passing. Bobby said that she heard a man yelling, "No," who she thought was her father, and she heard 3 banging sounds, which she believed were gunshots.
Becky came home approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon from school. She walked in through the front door, called for her mom. All she heard was crying from the master bedroom. At that time, she found them banging on the closet door to be let out.
Once Becky opens up the closet doors, Bobby went directly down to the basement, and Bobby saw her father's bloody, bullet-ridden body laying on that couch. It is difficult to imagine how terrifying this must have been.
While the family lived through an extremely traumatic ordeal, police are hopeful that with their help, they can catch Carl's killers.
Jackie and Bobby said that the suspects had actually pulled up their masks, so they had their face exposed to them.
Jackie described the first suspect as a male white, mid to late 20s to 30s, tall, dark-haired, and also had a mustache. The second suspect was shorter than the first, slightly heavier, was a white male, but had a pale complexion and facial hair.
Bobby and Jackie were able to do composites of the faces they saw. I think there was a lot of hope somebody's going to recognize these individuals.
When we heard about the sketch, we thought that would be it. They'd be able to find him.
I was hoping to get the information out as quickly as possible with the suspect's description, so that if someone was possibly stopped or seen within the general area, a patrol vehicle could have stopped them.
In Inverness, where crime is virtually non-existent, police believe there is more to this case than meets the eye.
It appeared to be a staged crime. It could be someone who owed money to someone and being shot for that, a jealous boyfriend. It could be a number of different things. You can't close your mind to any possibility at that point in time.
Coming up, investigators uncover sordid secrets.
He might have had some associates who might have been involved with the mob. It definitely raised a red flag.
The killers evade detectives until an unexpected witness steps forward.
You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to kill Carl.
To reveal a dark and twisted plot no one predicted.
As soon as they knew how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
That was the missing key.
Police are investigating the murder of commodities trader and father of four, Carl Gamari. His wife and young family were at home at the time of the terrifying attack.
Jackie and the two girls were mostly in shock. They were completely overwhelmed by what was happening.
Jackie and Bobby saw the gunman. Armed with their description, officers go door to door looking for witnesses.
One of the neighbors saw two men coming from the Gamaris through her yard, and she thought one of them was carrying like a jewel bag. After that neighbor pointed out where she saw the two men walking through her yard, the detectives went back and followed that path. They had found a cigarette butt that still had ash on it by her driveway.
That cigarette butt was collected by the State Police Crime Lab, but in 1979 there was no DNA, so there really wasn't much of the evidence that could be collected off of that cigarette butt.
More witnesses come forward to help police trace the suspect's movements.
There was a woman who was in her car around the time that this incident took place. She stated that she saw a beater-type gray car parked on the side of the street. When she returned approximately 3 o'clock or so, she said that she saw the vehicle oncoming towards her. She said that the driver was a white male. The second passenger in the front was a white male, but he was trying to slump down in the seat. In her words, she thought he was trying to hide himself.
The neighbor who saw that vehicle coming towards her with the two men was also able to do a composite.
It's similar to the one Jackie and Bobby gave police.
Composites are very, very useful. You can put them in the newspaper, you can get them on the news, you can get them out there for people, other agencies, to see if anybody could identify them as possible suspects. So after the canvass was conducted, they then did a sweep of the area between the victim's house and where this car was observed to see if they could find any evidence. They also discovered tire impressions and some footwear impressions that were in the mud there where the car had been parked.
Back at the crime scene, investigators get an unexpected visitor.
I noticed someone approached me and he pulled out his credentials as being a Chicago police officer and told his name was Sam Greco. Sam said that he was a family friend. The girls knew Sam. They felt comfortable around him.
He said that he had been called by the daughter, that something had happened, so he was coming out to see what assistance he could lend.
On the day of the murder, Becky made 2 phone calls. She did call 911. Her next call was to Sam to tell him what had taken place.
Sam originally arrived up the scene about an hour after the initial call. He had advised him that he had been on the phone with Jackie. This was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and that during their conversation, she said somebody was there, and he heard some voices in the background, and then the call was disconnected. So he had offered to give them his phone record so they could try to establish a timeline of when that occurred.
Based on the time of the phone call, police believe the gunman arrived at 12:30 p.m. and left by 3 that afternoon. They spent over 2 hours in the home, a detail that puzzles the investigators.
They spent so much time in the house, which is not normal. Home invaders usually come in, take care of business, and leave. They don't sit around. Second, the amount of items that were left behind didn't indicate that this was a straight-up home invasion.
My question was whether or not they knew that Carl Gamari was coming home at that point in time, and why did they kill him?
Who did it and why? And why my brother? What did he do that he deserved to have his life snuffed away and taken away? We had no idea who it could be.
In their search for answers, detectives turn back to Carl's wife, Jackie.
Anytime you're investigating a murder within a family, you have to look at the surviving spouse. It was clear that Jackie hadn't been the one to shoot Carl. 2 armed invaders came into their house and locked him in the closet. It was very traumatic to the kids and to Jackie. To have all of a sudden their peaceful day broken down with people with guns and then threatening them and not letting them move around the house, not knowing what was going to happen next.
They were absolutely terrified. Even after the suspects had left, it was difficult to get them to concentrate on making a statement. Jackie was crying, upset.
When detectives ask Jackie about her relationship with Carl, she tells them she loved him and that he was her high school sweetheart. But what she reveals about her marriage surprises investigators.
Carl and Jackie had a rather unorthodox situation at times. Over the years, they both had affairs, and they would bring their lovers home.
When you get information like that, that's an important thing to follow up on and look further to see if that has anything to do with what occurred here.
Had the couple's infidelities led to Carl's murder?
You have to look at that as a possibility.
It definitely raised a red flag.
It was definitely shocking.
Detectives investigating the cold-blooded murder of Carl Gamari have learned he and his wife, Jackie, had both been unfaithful.
That's a big red flag and needs to be looked at very thoroughly.
Jackie tells police they had recently agreed to work on their marriage.
They seemed to be getting better as you got into 1979. They were trying to work it out.
They went on a romantic vacation. They were making a plan to do another big trip to Africa. They were buying a new house, and they would tell friends that, yeah, things are getting back together for us. We're going to make an effort to make this work, especially because of the kids.
A year before the murder, the couple had even decided to renew their vows.
We as a family thought, wow, this is nice. This is really nice to see, that they wanted to get together and they have us there witness the renewing of their vows.
They were like 2 lovebirds. He was gleaming from ear to ear, and so was Jackie, and they seemed like a wonderful couple.
While Jackie was also a victim in this crime, detectives still need to know if she'd have anything to gain financially from Carl's death.
It was learned that there was only about a $30,000 life insurance policy. Carl had never signed a will, which ties it up in court and it could be 7 years before you see any of the financial gain from this. And so this kind of cleared Jackie of being in the spotlight of the investigation.
Investigators consider whether Carl and Jackie's renewed marriage could have driven one of their former lovers to murder. When they ask Jackie who she had an affair with, her answer is surprising.
Jackie and Sam Greco had an affair.
She said that she had dated Sam for quite some time, but that she had broken off the relationship with Sam to recommit to her marriage with Carl.
Jackie had said when she became pregnant with Nick, she stopped seeing Sam.
Detectives need to know, was Sam a jealous ex? Could he have killed Carl to have Jackie to himself?
Sam was interviewed once on the phone and then again in person. He had met Jackie at a wedding, and he was doing some private investigative work, and Jackie had hired him to follow Carl to see if he was having an affair. There was an indication from Sam's investigation that Carl was having an affair.
And that ultimately led to them initiating a relationship.
Sam also told the investigators that he and Jackie had been lovers, but they were now just friends.
Sam denied any involvement with this case.
They took his phone records, fingerprinted them, and they interviewed individuals associated with Sam.
He was considered a hero within the Chicago Police Department. The police back then still investigated him as much as they could.
The investigators ruled him out as not being involved in this.
With Sam eliminated from the investigation, detectives next look at the woman with whom Carl had been having an affair.
Gail Kayak was someone whom Carl had actually hired and worked with.
When Gail was interviewed, her description was it was kind of two adults having some fun together. It was nothing serious. She knew it was going nowhere. She knew Carl was married.
Gail tells investigators she and Carl broke things off about a year ago and that there wasn't any animosity between them.
She ended up, after the relationship was over between her and Carl, had a boyfriend, got pregnant. Given the affair had been over for a year, it just made really no sense that she would be involved in this in any way.
Just when detectives think they've hit another dead end, Gail gives them a stunning new lead. She says they need to speak to Carl's former friend and colleague, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser was one of the closer people to Carl at the Board of Trade. They had worked together there for a while. They socialized.
Gail claims Ned not only knew about her affair with Carl, but told Jackie about it.
Carl and Ned were friends. Carl would use his apartment to be with his girlfriend. Ned ultimately got upset with Carl, told Jackie that Carl was using his place to be with his girlfriend. Once Carl found out that Ned was the one who told Jackie about Gail, that soured the relationship.
Gail also tells police Ned had a dark reputation.
She had rumored that he had ties to organized crime. Whenever you're dealing with people with money and investment and all, there's always a possibility that someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
Had Carl and Ned fallen out over money? Had Ned put out a hit on his former friend?
You always look at the big picture. Business dealings with Ned, him betraying Carl to Jackie about using his place, Ned having some possible mob connections. I think you got to look at everything. You have to see what's there. Where does that lead you? Is this a person who has a reason to kill Carl?
Police are following a tip that the murder of successful trader Carl Gamari may have been a targeted hit, one organized by his former friend and coworker, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser might have been, quote-unquote, involved with the mob.
During the 1970s, Chicago was very much involved with the criminal network of the mob, and a number of people wound up dead every year.
Organized crime had a hand in gambling. From information obtained from co-workers and people that knew Carl, he gambled at the Board of Trade, he would gamble outside. If individuals are gambling like that, then chances are they would cross paths with organized crime people.
5 days after the homicide, Ned is brought in for an interview. Police ask about his friendship and working relationship with Carl.
The relationship with Ned and Kaiser and Carl and the family was an extensive, involved one. They had known each other for approximately 9 years, and at one point, when Ned was going through a divorce, they actually let him move into their house.
Ned says that's why he had a hard time keeping Carl's affairs secret.
Ned had told investigators that the reason he came forward to Jackie was because he was friends with both of them, and he just felt that Jackie was being mistreated by the way Carl was acting and needed to correct it.
Detectives ask Ned if Carl was indebted to him, or if they had any conflict about money.
Ned denied ever having any kind of a fight with Carl. Ned was asked if he had any involvement, if he knew anything about Carl's murder, and he denied having any direct knowledge. There was nothing that anyone could dig up that would say Ned was responsible for Carl's death.
The investigators took a very hard look at him to see if there was any way that he could have committed this crime. And they were able to rule him out. There was no evidence connecting him to the murder of Carl Gamari.
Investigators are forced to let Ned go.
The police talked to everyone that they possibly could. If they talked to one person and that person mentioned other people, they went and talked to those people as well. And then it gets to a point where there's just no other leads to pursue at that time. So the police are essentially waiting for new information.
Authorities once again turn to the public in an attempt to find the men who killed Carl and terrorized his family.
Their composites are very critical in our ongoing investigation in identifying the shooters.
I remember cutting out all the headlines and all that. Boy, something's going to be recognized with this sketch, and something's going to happen with this and come about from it. But days would go on and nothing.
When the sketches were released, there wasn't a lot of information that came in. Nothing substantial at all.
Detectives hope that the autopsy report will provide a crucial new lead.
Carl had been shot 6 times. The fatal wound had penetrated his chest into his heart and severed the aorta. When you have multiple shots like that from 2 different guns, it's apparent that their intent was to kill him.
And they shot him again and again and again and again, a total of 6 times.
Since the medical examiner didn't find any defense wounds on Carl, there is no physical evidence on his body to link to the perpetrators. Frustration grows when detectives get the report on the fingerprints found at the crime scene.
There were no known matches of any of those latent fingerprints. They had no real suspects.
Didn't seem like anybody was going to be arrested for this.
With the killer still on the loose, the town of Inverness is on edge, while Carl's family lives in fear.
A couple of days after the original murder, someone had put a threatening note in the mailbox. Jackie then went to the police and said she was being threatened, and that was her concern for her safety.
When I found that out, I was very disturbed. I was concerned about Jackie and the kids. Somebody wanted my brother killed.
2 weeks after the murder, police make a disturbing discovery.
It came to the attention of the initial investigators that there was a trader, worked at the Chicago Board of Trade, had just disappeared. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
Detectives learn his name is Artie Jones, and he's one of Carl's business associates.
Art Jones knew Carl. There may have been some money involved between the two of them.
No one knew what happened to him. He left for work, drove into the city, and was never heard from again.
Could the two cases be connected?
Now put a new light, a new focus with two traitors in close proximity, one dead and one missing. Put a different spin on this type of investigation.
At that point in time, when we heard the news and it was all over the papers, that we thought, wow, now we know there's something going on at the Board of Trade.
When you had Carl, who was killed and being part of Board of Trade, and then you have Artie, who disappears after going to work at the Board of Trade, those don't happen often.
And when Artie Jones happened, that was very concerning. It was, we wanted to find out, okay, who's after Artie and who's after Carl, if there was somebody, in fact, after both of them.
Two weeks after Carl Gamari's murder, his coworker, Artie Jones, has vanished. Detectives are hunting for a potential connection between the two cases.
Through the Highland Park investigation of Artie, they interviewed his wife, and she said that since the murder of Carl, he had become very edgy. He was very secretive about going out to meet some people for business at that time and then never coming back. It just heightened that concern she had about the two being related.
There was just no trace of him. They ran credit checks, they did phone records. They had absolutely nothing of where this individual may have gone or why he disappeared.
They located his vehicle near O'Hare Airport.
No reason why it was there, no rhyme. Couldn't put him on an airplane. There was just nothing. He was gone.
That investigation was rather lengthy, and they never did locate him. And eventually, his wife had him declared dead. It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Carl's family continues to push for answers.
I was persistent. I would call. I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, from the detectives. What's going on? What's the next step? What are you looking at? Months and months and months turned into a year turned into 2 years. Then you kind of lost faith a little bit.
Carl's loved ones try to cope with the terrible realization that his killers may never be found.
The investigation wasn't turning up anything. They broadcasted and showed those pictures of the two men for a long time. No one knew anything. The case is considered a cold case.
30 years later, the case is reopened.
Detectives Mike Kirby and Bill Stutzman took over that investigation, gave it new life. These were people who had investigated, hundreds of violent crimes in their careers.
I had spent 9.5 years on a homicide task force. So this was my first actual cold case.
We were told to look at this case from 30 years ago. Right away, you're like, 30 years? Who's even going to be alive from back then that we could talk to? But when we sat down and we compiled our plan of action, people we wanted to talk to, we became extremely excited about the possibility of this being solved.
As the new detectives start digging into the cold case, they are confronted with a daunting problem.
Barrington Police Department had 2 floods in their basement where their evidence was kept. These floods basically contaminated any of the evidence, ruling it unusable. Any DNA we might have was gone.
That's a major blow in an investigation. Most cold cases nowadays are solved through forensic evidence. We had none of that.
Then, in 2011, a stunning turn of events reignites the investigation.
We get a phone call. It was shocking to us.
Artie Jones had been located, living under an assumed name in Las Vegas, part of a fraud investigation by the federal government, and located him. We were extremely shocked that he was alive.
Investigators fly to Nevada to interview Artie Jones about Carl's murder.
Well, the first thing we wanted to know was what relationship did Artie Jones have at all with Carl? Did they have any kind of business transaction? He claimed he didn't even know him. So then we focused on why did he disappear then. When we talked to Mr. Jones, he said that he was having financial problems. He didn't like his job. He didn't like his life. He was unhappy with his marriage. So he just faked his disappearance. And that became very clear that he had staged all this by planting the car by the airport. The two had no connection. The Gamari murder and his disappearance were not related.
With the Artie Jones mystery solved, detectives are again left with no leads.
What we decided to do was to work this like it was a fresh case and just start from the beginning with no preconceived notions, no thoughts on where we were going to go with it.
Bill Stutzman and Mike Kirby re-interviewed everyone who had been interviewed that they could find back in 1979 and 80, and one of the people they interviewed was Jackie's sister, Tootsie. When police interviewed Tootsie the night of Carl's murder, she told them on the morning of April 30th, Jackie called Tootsie and told her to come over that day. And if Tootsie had come that day, I don't know if she would have been another victim.
Detectives bring Jackie's sister, Tootsie, in for an interview. As they question her, she makes a jaw-dropping revelation.
She said, I've been ridden with guilt throughout the years. I've seen what it did to the kids, what it did to his family. I can only be truthful about this. I can only tell you what was told to me.
Tootsie was having ulcers after the murder of Carl. She was holding a very big secret inside.
It troubled her to keep this secret for so long. She just realized, I believe, that it was the right thing to do, and that's what she always wanted to do.
And she proceeded to tell us about 2 months prior to the murder that Jackie had said, I don't love Carl anymore. I don't want to be with him. This is the time when Jackie and Carl were getting back together.
Jackie had supposedly stopped the affair with Sam Greco.
Based on what we learned, that was not the truth. Her affair still continued.
It was very shocking. It gives you a different light view of Jackie, yes, as a person and the type of individual she is.
What Tootsie says next leaves investigators stunned.
Jackie had told her of a plan that she had with Sam.
Jackie said to Tootsie, we've found a way to get rid of Carl. We're going to make it look like a home invasion. Some men are going to come in, they're going to tie me up, and they're going to wait for Carl to come home and kill him.
Tootsie couldn't believe what her sister was saying to her, and they just kind of ended the conversation with Tootsie saying, Jackie, you don't have to do that. Divorce him. Just divorce him. And Jackie would reply, if I divorce him, then I don't get all the money.
Jackie had told her how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
It seemed almost mind-blowing to think that Jackie could be involved in such a crime as to expose her daughters and her infant to their father getting killed in the home.
Investigators tell Tootsie they'll need more than just her word to lay charges.
They decided to ask her if she would be willing to record conversations with her sister Jackie. At first, Tootsie said no, she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to hurt Jackie.
We had emphasized with her that, no, we're not saying Jackie physically killed Carl, but she was part of a plan in which Carl was killed. And we had said, we're asking you to put an open-ended statement to her and see how she responds. She agreed to do it.
That was the missing key to make this case go forward.
More than 30 years after the cold-blooded killing of father of four, Carl Gamari, police learn his wife Jackie plotted his murder with her former lover, Sam Greco. But investigators need hard evidence to arrest her. They convince Jackie's sister, Tootsie, to record a conversation.
Hi, Jackie.
How you doing?
I'm not doing good, honey. The police have been here about Carl, and they've been asking me a lot of questions. They're saying I might have to go in front of the grand jury. I don't know if you remember what you told me.
I do. Are you going to do that, though, to me?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to.
Oh, my God. So just tell him that I wish he was dead. Don't tell him I said that, please.
They already know, Jackie. You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to break in and tie you up and put you in the closet and then kill Carl. You know?
You gotta help me, Tootsie. I can't go to jail. You gotta help me.
I can't lie. I can't lie.
Did you just tell them you're all confused and don't remember?
But they know I remember. They know I do.
Those recorded conversations are devastating.
Jackie saying, can you lie for me? Can't you say you forget? There was truth to what Tootsie was saying. And that's why Jackie wanted to lie for her. That was very damaging evidence.
Those recordings were all that were needed to have an arrest warrant issued.
Police bring Jackie down to the station.
We did not tell her she was under arrest, but she was not going anywhere. We had the arrest warrant. During the course of the interview, not only did we tell her, we talked to Tootsie, who told us about their conversation. We played portions for Jackie.
And I don't do that stuff. That's enough to put me away. What am I supposed to say when they ask me why I said that to you? What am I supposed to say?
That I can't answer. I don't know. Maybe you didn't mean to tell me, but you did.
What should I do?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You're my sister, but you're a witness against me. Your testimony is enough to put me away. I'm going to go to jail.
Confronted by her own words, Jackie tries to put the blame on her former lover, Sam.
Because she wanted to be able to say, yes, okay, early on, I said, let's do this. But then I backed out. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So therefore, I'm not guilty of Carl's murder.
There are so many things Jackie did that tells you what kind of a person she is. She wanted to be with Sam. She didn't want to be with Carl.
After the murder, Sam and Jackie married a few months later.
Several years later, Sam and Jackie were divorced. We continued a full-force investigation into Sam Greco's involvement, as also pursuing the two shooters. And before we could gain enough evidence to charge him, he passed away from his medical conditions.
On March 27th, 2013, Jackie alone is charged with the first-degree murder of her husband, Carl Gamari.
Jackie was the true monster. Without Jackie, this crime never would have happened.
In 2016, a jury finds Jackie guilty, but the verdict is overturned on appeal. Prosecutors offer Jackie a deal. She pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Justice finally was served. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it.
She was a true sociopath. And not just for taking Carl's life, but because of what she did to her children. She chose to have her children be victims of this traumatic event just for her own selfish needs to get rid of her husband.
A woman that involves her own children in a scheme, in a plan, in a plot to have their father murdered, her husband murdered. I don't know, if you ask me, that's not even human. That's the devil.
4 decades after the murder, police are still searching for the gunman.
This remains an open and active investigation. It's never going to stop. If there's any new information, the police are going to follow up on it. No matter how long those shooters live and how much time passes, they can never stop looking over their shoulder.
My brother was a good guy. He was very determined to succeed in anything he did. To see how he would have been when his children got older would have been a wonderful thing to happen, and I'm sure he would have loved it.
Who knows how our lives would have been, you know. A lot of missed opportunities, a lot of things that never happened. I lost a brother and, you know, somebody to look up to and somebody to experience life with, you know, the rest of the way. I miss Carl a lot.